Hey everybody, welcome to All Stars. I'm Sal, and I'm joined today, as always, in the show by Joshua Williamson, Uber writer extraordinaire. Josh, welcome back to the show, dude.
Hey man, how you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. It's a good
Yeah,
day. Got a lot
right.
of comic books to write, but it's always fun to take some time out of the day to talk to you about
To
comic
talk about
books
comic books. Yeah. Sometimes I
and
wonder if I'm
movies and
spending too much time
TV
thinking
shows.
about it. It's like, no, 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 no. I'm happy. I'm enjoying it. Studio's looking good. You got a lot of you got some of your books up.
Yeah,
You got some of your toys up. It's looking
yeah.
awesome.
I have a hole here for more absolutes. I need to get right here. Just the darkness right here. I got to find a way to put a couple more. I'm thinking about. I'm actually missing the second Jack Kirby Absolute Fourth World, so that'll go there.
Ah,
I haven't got
yeah.
that yet. And then I'm not really sure what else I'm gonna put in there yet. But yeah, I'm missing a couple absolutes I need to get.
Did you
But
get
yeah, I'm
that?
filling it in.
DC released that Fourth World Jack Kirby book. It had like the pink cover, I think a year ago or less.
Oh
And
yeah, I have that. Yeah, I have that somewhere in this. There's a pile of books over here.
oh yeah,
I
no,
have that over here. Yeah,
I
yeah.
got it for
Yeah.
half off at my comic shop. They're like, "Oh no, we're selling them like at a discount. Like DC made a nice like
Oh,
run
nice.
of them and stuff like that." It was just like getting it in the hands of people, and I was like, "That's really cool." Like just getting people
Oh yeah,
and getting
dude.
their hands on it.
Whenever you like stumble across a sale on something you want, it's so weird to say this. It's so funny how we have been tricked into paying money for things feels like an accomplishment.
Right?
But it's
Yeah.
like I remember on it was the day before Thanksgiving. I went down to I walked down to Things from Another World. This is like 10 years ago. I walked down to Things from Another World. It was one of the shops that was nearby me.
Yeah.
And I walked down there on it was like the day before Thanksgiving, and they happened to have some of the stuff already for sale for their Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
And one of them was the Absolute for All Star Superman, and
Oh.
it was half off. And I remember just being like, well, I have to do this. I've wanted this. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
I do this? And just walk back up the street holding my Absolute Superman. I was so happy with myself.
Oh, sure.
But
Yeah.
it was like, I also love that format. I just really love the Absolute format. So it was one of
Yeah.
those things where but yeah, it's funny how I was like so proud of myself for spending money. But I felt
Spending
like
money,
I
I
stumbled
bought it.
into like 50% off. So it was a nice little accomplishment for the day.
Absolutely. So before we get into just some just having fun and playing around with our obsessions, I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you. You've got you just announced on Twitter today, actually, not when
Yeah,
this
this
episode airs,
morning.
but Superman
Yeah.
Annual. What's it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
about? And what's because let me tell you something.
Oh,
If I can just gush for a second, because this is
sure.
Superman has been fantastic. It's I think
Oh,
we're 4 issues in. It's such a great
yeah.
book.
I have it right here. I have four right here. I was looking at this
Yes,
morning. Because I had
so
to
fun.
finish up five.
I mean, the art obviously is just
Oh,
like
Jamal.
uh, his art is such a high caliber of like
Yeah. Yeah,
awesome,
I'm very lucky.
you got teases of like, man, I want to see the greater DC universe because obviously his work on Naomi was so fantastic,
Mhm.
and but now to get him into Metropolis and deep into Metropolis, it's not just like
Yeah.
oh, it's like you because it's so easy. You can imagine just give Jamal like an event or give him like a Justice League book. I want to see everybody drawn by Jamal, but
Oh, yeah.
we get to see his version of Jimmy and Lois and Lex and Mercy. Like everything in that world is so idyllic, and it's like what I want to see from that book. And if you haven't already
Oh,
picked it up,
thanks.
folks, issues 1 through 4. It's not one of those books that's just like, oh, it's another Superman. No, it's like the Superman you've been waiting for. So check out that book.
Oh, thanks,
But
man. I mean, it's
of
a lot
course,
to hear you say that. I told you before that I live in a bubble.
well, yeah,
Like I don't
exactly. Well,
really, we talked about before, like my social media stuff is run by somebody else. Surprise. I don't really, and it's something we can talk about when we talk about some of this stuff later. But I try my best not to really take in too much side voices. And that's a lot
of
of
course,
what the book was even about in the beginning. Is Clark, tuning things out.
right.
Tuning out Lex, tuning out those
Oh,
other
that's
voices,
funny. I
but
didn't even think
tuning
about
out.
that.
Yeah, so that's part of that's what Paul Kent was saying on the first page. A lot of people will be telling Clark what to do.
Right.
And I always find that way with a lot of superheroes, and even when you're working on these books, you always have people telling you what to do,
Yes.
and you have to tune it all out and kind of focus just in on yourself and then on the story, and that's what I've been doing more and more the last few years. Is like, even dating as far back as like Rebirth is really when I started getting further more and more isolated.
Huh?
I mean, I talk to people. I have creators. I talk to people like you. I talk to my editorial, and I talk to a lot of stores, and I love talking to fans at conventions. Like I really enjoy that, or signing. That's really what I like the most. But I try to do so. So I have no idea how things are half the time. But I'm glad to hear people are liking it. Jamal is a genius, and I think that Jamal, you know, he's such a good character worker, you know, and he adds so many cool like little elements to the story.
Absolutely.
And he adds all these little touches, and I think there's a strong trust between the two of us when it comes to the book and the things we're doing. And I think we're also at a point where we're both trying to give each other work, or give each other elements of the story that will make the other person smile and have fun.
Sure.
You know, because that's it. Like, you know, I'm having a lot of fun writing it. It's intimidating at times, but it's very fun to write, and he's clearly having fun drawing it. He also feels a little bit of intimidation sometimes from it, but you know, like issue 4, he did a really great job on it, and then we had Nick Dragata come in for the 4 pages to do a sequence with young Lex, and we'll have that happen again down the line. Partially because I really love young Lex. I love the Secret History of Metropolis stuff with Lex.
The Secret History of Metropolis thing, I was like, what?
Well, Clark wasn't there. Like, I mean, it's so funny. Like, you know, Lex was there for almost 10 years before. Yeah. Right? So you're like, what was he doing in that time? Well,
exactly. But I love the idea of him donning a costume of sorts and being
yeah. Well, it's a very like pulpy, like very like Doc Savage kind of look to it. You know, like I wanted something that felt a little older in a way, you know, a little more golden age. I love not that. Quite a superhero, you know, but like a science hero. You know, you know, I like the pouches. That was actually what I had for like he needs to have pouches, he needs to have a jacket, you know, the on the shoulder and all that stuff. Like you know, the goggles, like I really want him to have a bit more of a science hero sort of look opposed to just straight up a superhero look. Like I don't think, especially at that time, I don't think Lex really saw him as that, you know? No. And I wanted a bit more of like I don't want to say year 1 Lex look, but that is it. Like this is not a person who has all the technology and the money and the riches that he had later. So he's kind of making do, and so that was the motivation in that costume, and we'll do more with that later. Right. But yeah, issue 5 looks like amazing. I mean, I was looking at it like last night. I came in here last night and I was just looking at it, and I was like, man, this is so cool. Like Jamal just knocks it out, and I love the way he draws Jimmy, and I love the way he draws Silver Banshee. And just Silver Banshee. There's some. Yeah, go ahead.
Relegated normally to like a background character. You never really like Silver Banshee's like, oh no, things are serious. They called everyone, even Silver Banshee. But this is people remembered that she's actually she's not American. You know, she has you wrote her voice phonetically, you know.
Well, I didn't. That was actually something that was kind of tough because I didn't want to get like hardcore with it. Like I don't want to be like Chris Claremont X-Men with it.
I was gonna say you didn't want to make it like like Rain
trying to walk a line
or Rogue. It's just sugar.
No, but that's why I had that. That's why I had Graph make that joke of like top of the morning to you. And she's like, oh come on. Like come on. I'm not that bad. That's why that was part of it. But you know, I can hear her voice, everybody's voices. And there's some stuff with her that I really love in the next issue. But you know, I really wanted to play with all the pieces in the supporting cast. And I've always liked her as a character. I think she's a really like awesome visual. Like she's just a really cool visual. And I think she's unique among a lot of Superman's rogues and the villain. I thought she had like an interesting look, interesting backstory. You know, she's a little bit less. Also, there's the magic connection, the supernatural connections. You know, and it's like so much of Superman's villains are based around science for the most part. Even Mixoplick, because Mixoplick's on science. At least to me, he's on science. You know, he's a fifth dimensional character.
Yeah, but I don't see him as magic either, right? So it's
What's that?
I don't see him as magic either.
No,
no. You know, other.
Well, it's fifth dimension. You know, it's like he's messing with reality because he can do that because he's a god essentially, right? Yeah. Mixoplick is funny because Mixoplick is the one Superman villain I don't know if I'll touch. I have some thoughts on him, but I wrote him. Yeah, I wrote him I did a Mixoplick in Batmite story in Batman Superman as an annual, and I'm always like, that was my Mixoplick story. That was the one, you know? Yeah. But it's funny because like I have a list in my notebook of all the Superman villains and how to do them a little different, like how to not update them. I don't want to say update them, but just to shine a different light. Yeah, like we've done so far with Parasite and Livewire, and you know, because so much of the book is about like making everyone take like one step, right? So you have like Clark taking a step towards before Lex taking a step toward being, you know, I don't want to call him a hero, but becoming the Oracle for him. It's Lois. It's Lois going to become editor in chief.
Yes.
It's Jimmy being in like, you know, basically he's moved in with his girlfriend. You know, it's Silver Banshee stuff with her. It's like every Parasite, you know, having his powers kind of changed on him a little bit, having Silver Banshee's powers change on a little bit. It's all these like just a step into the new and fresh and shining a different light on it. That's a major point of it. And that's where like, again, the annual, you know, the annual is sort of like in a lot of ways it's Superman 5.5, you know, it's kind of like, it's this sort of, it's a very crucial story to the story we're telling in Superman, but it's almost like showing it. Oh, this Chris Samnee cover is amazing. Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's almost like, dude, I've wanted a Chris Samnee cover on one of my books forever, and then they surprised me with this one. It's one of my favorite covers of the book.
Yeah.
Actually, I need to reach out to Chris and ask him if I can buy that cover.
Yeah, get it before Tom buys it because he's.
I'm gonna make this note. I'm gonna make a note of myself.
Superman Annual
Chris.
2023.
I'm literally writing this down right now. So I can remember to do it. You know, I have because I think I showed you. I have a Chris Samnee like piece of art. I showed it on the last one of like from Batman. He did one of the sketches. But
yes.
He's also a genius. He's also an amazing creator.
Yeah.
I hope everyone reads Firepower. That book is really good. Anyway, but you know, so it's a kind of a different point of view on what things are happening in Metropolis, because Metropolis has been going through all these changes. Yeah. And one of the things that Lois kind of looks at, and she says this in 5, and it comes up in the annual, which is, you know, there's all these new mysteries sort of coming up in Metropolis, all these pieces of information they didn't know was here, like the secret history of Lex. You know, It's like all these sort of things, Marilyn Moonlight, you know, Farm and Graph. Yes. What else is here? What else are we missing? And so there's this thing in the annual where Lois kind of talked about it. She's like, you know, is Metropolis the city of tomorrow, or is it the city of secrets? And but here's the problem: is that Lois Lane, who is editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet, in the past, when she was a reporter, she would just go out and investigate those things on her own.
Just beat the pavement, exactly.
So now she has to send her reporters out to do what she used to do.
Sure.
And so there's a frustration there for her because she wants to be the one to do it. And then Superman obviously is in the story, and he's going through an adventure with Supercorp at the same time and dealing with Farm and Graph stuff. But a lot of it is like different reporters going and investigating things that are happening in Metropolis. And then we get to have some really cool teases about stuff for later this year and for stuff for 2024 that we're building forward. So we really want to make people know, like, as much as this book, I am doing these sort of short Monster of the Month arcs, right? So like the first arc was 3, this arc is 2, the next arc is 3, and then it's like a 2-parter and then a 3-parter. Like I'm doing these kind of staggered. There are C and D plots that are sort of ramping up across. Like obviously the stuff with Farm and Graph and things with Lex are ramping up.
Yes.
But there's other things we kind of tease in the first issue that are slowly building. And there's other things, you know, we have stuff that are going on. You know, some of the things that are going on with Amanda Waller that are happening in the DCU that also starting to, you know, so there are things that are moving in the DCU. And so this annual is one of those touchstones. Same with Night Terror. Like Night Terror has things in it that create touchstones for Dawn of DC.
Oh yeah.
You know, we show like, oh, these mysteries are here. These are important pieces of this puzzle. Right. They may not all become clear immediately, but eventually, you know, I always think that like, when I think about comics, it's so much of a, I try to make sure I give you a singular reading experience, but I also want to make sure that like, when you go to reread it, you might get to the end. It's kind of like when you're watching, you know, you watch a really good show.
Yep.
You get to the end of the season and you're like, oh, and then let's say you watch that season and you're like, oh, all that stuff was there in the first episode.
Right.
It was all set up. It just didn't become clear until later. You know, I always love stuff like that. You know, I love all this kind of story symmetry, right? Things go in circles and stuff. And that's one of the things I always talk to people when I talk about endings. I'm always like, these things have to come around again.
Yes.
I thought the stuff I always love when I'm writing is like each last page and like, oh, that was built up. You know, these things happen. And same with all stories, you know, they go in these sort of circles.
Well, and that's the thing, like as a reader, you know, like a story will resonate with you stronger if you like remember, if you pay off something that your brain recognizes was something that's set up, I think it becomes much more satisfying. You're like, it locks into place and you're like, this was a good story, you know, and I'm paying attention. I'm rewarded for paying attention.
Yeah, that dude, that's it right there. Reward for paying attention.
Right?
I feel like a lot of stuff I do, I try to do that, but it's weird because you don't want to like hit them over the head with it. Like
No.
you don't want to have to be like, oh, by the way, like
Yeah.
it's tough with that sometimes. I remember when so like in this issue of Superman that came out, issue 4.
Yeah.
This is a minor version of this, but just to be an example, at the very beginning when Silver Banshee is in the apartment.
Yeah.
And she's talking to her boyfriend. We don't see who her boyfriend is. She calls him like Turtle Boy, and she's like Lois Lane is his boss.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like if you're a Jimmy Olsen fan, you're probably like, oh, her boyfriend's Jimmy Olsen.
Exactly.
Like,
no, I didn't even question it. And I questioned when they had the reveal, I wondered if we talked about it already. And I was like, I don't think we did.
Have.
I don't think you did reveal that Silver Banshee was so, because I remember you just saying, we're gonna use Silver Banshee, and I was like, oh, that's awesome.
I also have my Superman mug. I call this my Fortress of Solitude mug. I'm always on brand. Anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. See, for a second, when you pulled up that glass, I thought it was going to be from McDonald's, and it was a promotion for Batman Forever. And
dude, I had those, and sometimes I see them at stores and at conventions, and I'm like, should I?
The
I already have enough
carrying
stuff.
glass jar or glass
cups.
Yeah,
dude, it would break.
Through a convention.
Yeah, I had those when I was a kid. I had all when I was a kid, and I regret ever getting rid of them. That's why I focus all of my nerdom into Batman Returns. So everything I get is Batman Returns, not forever, and everything else is always that one. Yeah. I get real picky about it. So even when they release new toys, whenever they release new toys and stuff, if the logo is from '89, not Returns, because it's different, right?
Oh, I do know. Yes,
you talked about it before.
Did V. Neil design that one? Yeah.
Who?
I think V. Neil, the costume designer, made that one.
Oh, right. Yeah, that weird. It's
that weird little swoosh. You know what that is? That's the Guillermo del Toro thing. Everybody's got to put their dick in it.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Everybody's got to.
Yeah. I told you that.
You did, but it's like.
They got to touch it. They got to move it an inch just to make sure that that's their signature on it.
It's effing Batman. The poster has a completely different logo. They're like, yeah, but
different logo.
Batman has that one.
Yeah, when I was, I'm not sure if I want to say who the creator was, but one time me and like 3 other creators were walking to the DC offices, and they had that Batman costume in the lobby. Not in the lobby. It was down one of the hallways. They had it. Like the actual costume was in the lobby or
that's awesome.
One of the hallways from '89.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love this movie, but this one thing always bugs me. And they were like, what one thing? I'm like, you don't know this before? And I went over, I'm like, look. And none of them. And I'm talking about people who have worked on Batman.
You didn't notice?
Were like, they were like, I never noticed that this was here. And I was like, dude, yeah, it drives me crazy. Yeah, I think it drives me nuts, dude.
As a kid, I was like, it's wrong. What happened? Like,
dude, it's so weird. I have a giant over here. I'll have to take a picture. I might have showed you this already. Oh, I put it on Instagram. I have that giant Batman bust from Returns.
Yes. Oh,
it's the correct. It's the correct thing.
The good logo.
I have to have the correct thing. If it's not the correct thing, it drives me nuts. Anyway, Superman.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say really quick. The Batman, the world's finest book from Wade and Mora. That must drive you nuts because clearly Dan Mora loves that logo and he's incorporating it.
Here's the thing. I will say this. Listen, Dan Mora is also a genius. He can do whatever.
Isn't he? Yeah, he does whatever he wants.
He is a saint, nice person, genius.
Lucky to have him.
Yeah, lucky to have him. Listen, that guy can do whatever he wants. Whatever.
Yeah. Honestly, you know what it is? It doesn't. Nowadays, it's like he does that, and it's like, oh well, that's in a comic book. That means it's canon. That means it's real.
It's. I don't know. I think it's different. Partially because that book takes place in the past, I guess. But it's like, but also it's Dan Mora, dude. Dan Mora can do whatever he wants.
Good.
I'm like.
I don't know why, but I like it in there. But yes, as a kid, it drove me nuts. I'm like,
it drives me crazy because what's funny is like, able to notice it. Yeah, the poster, everything, all the merchandise was correct.
Yes, just
and
in the movie.
I think that's why people never click.
Yeah, no,
and so like that one drives me crazy. Yeah. Anyway,
Superman.
Yes, but yes, the annual. We have a bunch of great artists in there, and it's going to be really exciting. And there's some teasers and some stuff that are like things I'm really excited about. But at the end of the day, it's about those characters. It's a story about them as reporters. It's Lois as editor-in-chief. It's Clark as a reporter. It's kind of like a day in the life of Daily Planet in Metropolis, and they're investigating these different things that are going on. So it's been, it's been really fun. We have some fun stuff in there, but yeah, it's Lois and Jimmy and Cat Grant and Steve Lombard and a couple other new reporters.
Yeah, I was
that we're going to put in there, but it's just really fun.
Yeah. Are we and I don't want to spoil anything, but I will ask just because why not? But because Lois has kind of ascended to the Perry White role, are there going to be some hot new young would-be Lois Lanes that Lois is going to have to deal with?
Yeah, I have an idea for something with that. That's not going to be in the annual. Like, there definitely are newer people in there, but I'm not gonna. I have an idea for that a little bit. It's a matter of room at that point and making sure I can move that around.
Fit it
But
in. Yeah.
I do have some stuff about that. Of there being that there is a new reporter. Daily Planet does get a new reporter in the issue that I'm 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 really curious what people are going to think because it's a character people know.
Oh, cool.
So Lois does hire someone, and
Oh,
it is a
no.
character that people know. That's the
Okay.
most I can tell you.
I
And it is
won't. I won't
definitely
even. I
something
won't
that-
say a thing. Okay. I'm like, oh, I
It's
think
definitely. I was driving yesterday thinking about it, and I was like, it's really fun. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah.
So Lois
Yeah,
does hire someone else as a reporter to work at the Daily Planet.
Sure.
Sort of. You'll see. You'll see. I'm not gonna say who it is, but he does hire somebody. That's a character people are they're very familiar with this character that she hires. So that's the most I can tell you. But it makes sense. There is a 100%. I think when it happens, you're gonna be like, oh,
Yeah.
that 100% makes sense, and it's actually really smart of Lois in the moment to hire this person. So
yes. No, yeah. I think we're on the same page. I'm not going to ruin it, but I think yes, I love it.
Oh, if you have a guess, tell me after.
I will. No, after the show, I will definitely be like,
okay, yeah, tell me. Tell me your guess. But yeah, it's been really fun working on Superman. I feel really, really, I feel really lucky to be working on Superman, and I really appreciate like what you're saying and stuff, and it's been a lot of fun.
Sure.
And I think if it's weird, like I mean, 2 years ago, if you had said like, "Hey, you're gonna be writing Superman 2 years," I wouldn't have believed. Partially because there were other books I had talked to DC about at the time, but a year ago when I started really working on it, and I had that notebook full of ideas, it just started like the shape of the book really became so clear, and the tone of it and the vision I had for it just became so clear, and the voices of the characters and how to do it a little different than I had seen before. I don't know. I'm glad people like it because I like writing it. Like it's a lot of fun. Like it's a book that makes me smile as I'm working on it, and like whenever Jamal turns in pages, because he doesn't turn them in like one at a time, he turns them in like blocks. Dude, I will race to look at those pages. Like I will run as fast as I can to get to my computer, my iPad, whatever, my phone. Like I'll just be like, oh my god, this is amazing because he just really knocks it out. Like Jamal does amazing work on.
Nice.
I'm glad people are liking it. But yeah, the annual is gonna be really important, and we have a bunch of cool covers. And like on my Substack, we showed a bunch of them on Twitter. We're gonna be posting them all day today. So by the time this airs, that'll all be out there.
Oh yeah. Good. All right.
But it's really exciting. Yeah, we have a Jock cover, we have a Jorge cover. It's gonna be a fun issue, and then we have a lot of really cool plans for the fall for Night Terror. I'm really excited about this annual. I was really early on. I was like, it's funny because most times when you do annuals, they become these kind of like side stories, right? Like they become these kinds of like fun one and done things.
Yes.
But when I was looking at my actual plan for the book, I realized I was like, oh no, I need this annual. Like,
a little extra pages.
Well, because also it's just that with this book, I'm trying to let it breathe a lot more and let it.
Yeah.
Because I want those character moments. I want those quieter moments with this cast. Not everything has to be, explosions all the time. And it has to be like loud, which is sort of what, again, the theme of one of the themes of the book is about music and about tuning things out. And it's like, I don't want the book to always be loud all the time. I want to have those quiet moments between the characters. And that actually that is part of the book, is them also recognizing they need quiet moments among themselves, which can be hard when you have someone like Silver Banshee coming and screaming all the time. So I wanted so I there's definitely some thematic stuff going on with the book, but so it's like with the annual, I knew I needed to have put a couple pieces on the table, but also to have more of those character moments and to continue to flesh out sort of the story we're doing in Metropolis and things that are happening in the Daily Planet with Lois and the pressure she feels by being editor-in-chief. But also show some more Supercore and Mercy, and show these other characters, but still make sure that Superman is in the book doing Superman stuff. but yeah, that's the annual in a nutshell, and it's been really fun to work on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's looking great. I can't wait, man.
Uh,
Did you? Yeah.
do you want to talk about? We want to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy.
I
We
figured,
talk
yeah, I'd
about
ask
that.
you.
Yeah,
Did
so
you catch
Guardians of the Galaxy,
Guardians?
and then we can get to the
The
last time.
2012
I
story.
promised we would talk about
Yeah,
2012 stuff, and
that'll be the big.
it'll be interesting conversation
I can't wait,
to get
man.
into. But
Yeah,
yeah, let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy for a moment. I loved it.
yeah,
I really loved it. I you know when I was watching it, I had this moment where I was like, "Oh man, I'm so glad that James Gunn is working on DC movie now." Like in the middle of the movie, I was just like,
like we're so
"Oh,
lucky.
thank you, yes, yes,"
Yeah,
because he just nails it, dude. Like we were saying before we started, but it's just like action, emotion, drama, humor. It's like all of it, and it
yep,
breathes. Like he somehow hits every beat you want.
yeah,
Like every beat you want. You're just watching it, dude. It's so flawless, and everyone gets a character arc.
yep,
Everyone gets an emotional moment. We were
yeah,
talking about that stuff that comes around. Everybody got to have something come around,
yes.
right? It was just like, oh man, dude.
The main
Everyone's
dwell in
watching.
it,
We haven't
like,
seen.
yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, we're gonna get deep into spoilers probably
Oh
right
yeah.
now for a few
So
minutes. So yeah,
yeah,
be careful.
spoilers for
But
Guardians.
yeah, for the next, I would say the next 10 minutes, we're gonna talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, and then we'll
Exactly.
skip ahead and we'll talk about when I thought my career at DC was over in 2012. We can talk about that. Yeah, I don't even like calling it a career. I always get weird about calling things a career, and I'll explain why. But I thought I was done, almost done in comics in 2012.
Right.
We'll
The
get to
comics
that
is
in a
over.
minute.
Yeah.
We got some fun. We're gonna talk about Guardians of the Galaxy for a minute.
Yeah. Uh, dude. So yes. Every character gets an arc. Every character gets a moment to shine, at least one, if not two.
Yeah.
There's a good tight story, and it does that thing that I love when superhero movies can get away with it, which is it's not the okay. So it's not the end of the world, yet they also blow up an entire planet. So it's like it's not.
Dude.
It is
Yeah.
the end of the world, but it's like it's so. The stakes are. I remember somebody criticizing the movie, and they were like, "Oh, it feels more like a TV show because like the stakes were so low."
I know I'm not
You
for
know,
a TV show, but
no, exactly. But I'm like,
the emotional
stakes
stakes
couldn't
in
have
that
been
movie are
higher.
so heavy.
Yeah, no, like
Yeah, dude.
we have spent 5 movies making you fall in love with Rocket Raccoon, and then to threaten his life, you know, immediately. Like I remember from the trailer, just seeing so much Rocket going like they're gonna kill Rocket, and I'm gonna lose it. And
dude, they could kill any character in that movie, and we would have been all like crying babies in that theater.
Absolutely,
any character. I was positive Drax was gonna die. I was like, dude, Drax is not making it out of this.
No.
You know, there's
was
no
so,
way he's
like
gonna make
open about him leaving and about him not wanting to do this anymore, and so we're like, all right, well, he'll probably get a cool send off.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, this is really any of those characters, it would make you sad, and it could have been used to successful effect. It would have been fine, you know, if anyone died. But he does the impossible and manages to wreck you emotionally, but also still preserve everyone.
Oh, dude,
it's incredible.
It is high art, and I say this, and it's gonna sound bad, but that movie is so emotionally manipulative.
100%.
Like, right. And I say that in a nice way. Yeah. But it's like every scene they just, and I love this. I love when they trick you. Like I think storytelling is in a lot of ways tricking people. You know, like it is a bit of trying to get you to think you're going this way and then go this way and pull the rug out and then get you to be emotionally invested and engaged. Totally. And then to kind of play with those emotions and then get you, it's roller coaster, right? With the highs and lows. And then, so with Drax, there was that part where he got shot twice or whatever. And I was like,
and I'm like, he's dead right here.
This is it. And this is going to be a turning point. And then I was like, oh, he's going to die protecting those kids. And I was like, fuck, this is going to be rough. Like, it was just these constant moments of, you know, them messing with you. Rocket, Star-Lord, everybody. Star-Lord, Peter Quill going back to the music.
Oh my god,
and that was like, oh dude, if he dies going back to the music, that would have been too tragic. Though.
It would have been tragic, but I would have gotten it. It would have been one of those things where it's like I understand. I would have been mad.
I understand. Yeah, he's going back to music because he wasn't going back to music for himself. He was going back to music for Rocket. So I feel like that was tough. But then I was like, there's also that built-in thing in your brain, even just as like a storyteller, that is like, so Adam Warlock is going to come flying at any minute now, right? Like you're just like, Adam Warlock is going to show up at some point.
Right.
And do something monumentous like in this moment somehow, right? And so when they did that, and then obviously, there's so many because the idea of Adam Warlock being, he is Adam, right? So like the stuff with him saving Peter Quill, and they obviously did a lot of symbolism and visual symbolism in that moment that was really powerful. And so it was like, okay, I get what you're doing. It's beautiful, and like all the stuff with the characters. Like I said this to you before, but it was like that moment where she's like, oh, to Drax, she's like, you're not a destroyer, you're a dad. So that theater just like, just like, and Rocket, dude, I was really, I couldn't tell while I was watching it. I was like, is Rocket going to die? Right. Like, I couldn't get to that moment of like, is he going to? And I think that, again, that level of emotional manipulation and storytelling, I don't say it in a bad way. I mean, that's what you want, though. You want it to be a little unpredictable. Yeah. It's always that thing where you want them to like get a step. Like, you want them to be a step ahead of you, right? Too many steps, you're doing a bad job. Too far behind, you did a bad job. He nailed that step. Like, he was always one, and you're like, I'm following you. I'm getting there. I'm picking up the pieces. Yes. I'm almost there. But with that, it was like just slightly unpredictable. And then you're like, okay, he's going to do this. But you're figuring out like 2 seconds before it happens, kind of thing.
Totally. Well, that's the thing. Like the moment when Peter goes back for the music, it's the Indiana Jones gets his hat moment. That's what you're set to believe, right? Because
that's a good way to put it.
Right? Because everyone's good. Everyone's good. We've done it. We've saved the kids. We've saved everybody. We're good. And if we're going to kill anyone, we've already done it. You're thinking they're going to kill Cosmo when Cosmo is using their telepathy or their telekinesis too much, and you're like, "Don't kill the dog!" Like, because
don't kill the dog, dude. I mean, they killed. I mean, when they killed his friends, I mean that stuff, dude.
Yeah.
My wife, I came home, and I told her before I came home, because I saw it with an editor from DC, and we both were like, "Hell yeah!" The movie was over. And I came home and I told my wife, I was like, you could probably never see this movie.
Right.
I was like, I don't think you can make it. And she was like, well, she thought I meant it was just sad.
Yeah.
And I was like, it is sad. It is a sad movie, but I think you'll be okay. And then she saw a clip or something and basically alluded to like the animal cruelty stuff and the animals dying. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, never mind. She was like, I have to watch it by myself and just have a box of Kleenex and be fine. No, but we I still want her to see it because I think she'll really like it. But some of the Rocket, and then dude, there's so many like little James Gunn is like all over that movie. There's all kinds of little stuff. I mean, there's that part where that guy is running with the monkey and he throws the monkey at that woman and the monkey starts scratching
the monkey rips her face off, and I'm like, I guess because monkeys are unreliable, and that's exactly what they would do. Yeah, that's true.
That's exactly what they would do. But it's beautiful. It's such a funny little moment of just like this realistic thing that's also a little ridiculous, a little bit scary. It's like I remember years ago, I remember watching Slither, and I was like, this movie is made for me. That's another James Gunn movie, Slither. I was like, this movie is made for me, but I can only watch it once.
No, that's true. Yeah. JamesGunn is one of those
this
people
movie's awesome. It's so gross and so funny, and so it's like hits all these beats for me as well in terms of that gross humor. Like really well done storytelling. But I'm also just like, I can only watch the movie one time because it hits too many of those beats. But Guardians of the Galaxy, dude, like I came home and I was like, I could watch it again right now. Like I could sit down and watch it right now. And I had a friend, he sat down and he watched all of it. So he watched 1, 2, Infinity War, Endgame, Christmas special. That's awesome. I mean, literally, I came home that next day. So Friday, I had like a bunch of work to do, and I got lunch for myself. And then I just watched the little Rocket and Groot shorts on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah,
I just sat there and I just watched those. One of my favorite scripts I ever wrote for Marvel was actually a what if story. It was a what if Guardians of the Galaxy story, and it was I wrote it the same week that the first movie came out.
Oh.
And Jason Copeland drew it, and it's a lot of fun. It's like if anyone ever wants to read anything else of mine, there's this one story I did. It's all from the point of view of Rocket. Has a cool cover with like Rocket aiming a gun at Thanos' head, and it's like a what if Guardians of the Galaxy story that is almost it's not enough of a what if. I almost feel like it's like a tiny change on something that happened during Infinity. But when the John Hickman event,
it's in the collection. What if Infinity? So
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's in there. It's one of my favorite things they ever done for Marvel. But I actually wrote that like the week. I wrote it the week the movie came out, the first movie.
Nice.
And so I always feel like I have a connection to those characters. You know, whenever you write them, you get like a connection. But writing that one,
Yeah.
I really liked it a lot, and I always liked that cast. And yeah, I just really love that movie, dude. It was such a like just firing all cylinders, man. You leave that theater, and you're just like, hey, good job, everybody. Like,
oh yeah, no,
everybody should get a raise.
and you know, Chukwudi Iwuji's High Evolutionary takes a character that I've never liked and turn them into one of the best villains in the Marvel Cinematic
One of the best
Universe,
villains,
easily.
One of the best. I mean, you got Thanos, you got Killmonger, and now you got
and then High Evolutionary.
Dude, those are. I think I might be wrong. People probably dispute this, but I think those are probably the top 3 villains.
I don't think anyone would argue with that.
Well, Loki is a great villain, but now
he's a protagonist.
He's a protagonist, and he is complicated, right?
Yes.
Like they did such a good job with him as a character, where it's like, yeah, he was a villain in the beginning, but it's complicated.
They're not going to give Thanos
work with
him. You know what I mean?
Oh, like, give Thanos. You don't know.
Thanos is complicated, but they're not going to give him his own show. He's a villain.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I feel like with him, you know, with High Evolutionary, dude. I mean, I actually like that character.
I was like, we need to bring him back, like now.
Oh, dude, he was just, I mean, scary.
Yeah,
scary, emotional, unpredictable, like violent. You know. Yep. They did a lot of cool stuff with him, you know. It's like he just really felt evil. Like,
felt intimidating and in a believable, understandable way, in a way that like makes him, because and he's doing stuff with that character that is, you know, it's not Jeremy Irons in Dungeons and Dragons, where he's like, I'm in a stupid bullshit child movie. Here I go chewing up the scenery. But he's also not like.
That's really weird you brought that up, because I watched the new Dungeons and Dragons last night, and for a hot second I was like,
Jeremy
yo,
Irons?
that wasn't Jeremy Adams. That wasn't Jeremy Irons. A little shout out Jeremy Adams. Is awesome.
Hey.
Anyway. I was like, that wasn't him, dude. That was Hugh Grant. What are you talking about? But
yeah,
no, but he, dude, yes, and I actually love overacting in villains. I like when they choose scenery. You know, I like when they, you know, we talk about that with like, you know, Batman Returns. You got like Max Shrek and you got the Penguin. Like they definitely do that, and Jack Nicholson the Joker. Like I love villains in movies that choose scenery.
Totally.
He definitely chose scenery a little bit. Like he was in the scene, and he was very much a presence. Exactly. Yeah, but he just nailed it. Like that guy. You know, because like Killmonger is also a very like emotional villain, right? Yes. A very complicated emotional villain, and extremely well done villain. One of the best, right? Yeah. It had a really strong heart as a character. Totally. And it's very High Evolutionary, because I don't think that he necessarily had any heart. Like he wasn't like a tragic character.
Exactly. You don't sympathize with him, but you do understand him as a character, which is all you need.
Yeah. Because he was the same thing he was accusing the other things of, where he is. It's interesting, right? Because he is how do I put this? He is technically intelligent. Right. He is not a true genius.
Nope.
Rocket is a true genius.
Yes.
Like he is seeing things other people are not seeing, and to him it comes across easy. And I think that's part of what High Evolutionary hates so much.
Yeah.
Obviously, because Rocket is a true genius, but also it's coming to him easy. Like he's just like, yeah, I can do that.
Right.
Like, and he's not there. It's weird because he's humble, but not really at all. Right.
No,
it's just like,
that's right.
Talking about it, knows he's smart, but he doesn't see it the same way High Evolutionary does. Where High Evolutionary, it's very fascinating, even from a creator level, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, High Evolutionary is somebody who is technically really sound, but is unable to sort of hit that. It's like he's working hard to be technically sound.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. This is very hard for me to be almost as smart as you on your dumbest day. And
exactly. And so Rocket is just like, you know, like Rocket looked at it and was like, he was problem solving. And he was being, I mean, really what it comes down to in a lot of ways is that Rocket is creative.
Yeah.
Like that's and High Evolutionary wasn't, you know, like, and I think some of that comes from the fact that maybe it has something to do with compassion and heart. You know, the fact that High Evolutionary is looking at everything as tools to be used, right?
Right.
Like he's just using everyone. And Rocket doesn't see that way, right? Rocket is like, these are my friends, and you know, and he's able to kind of like, he's doing it out of way of helping.
Well, and it's so like just if you look at the two characters, just building off of that point, which is brilliant, the idea of like Rocket when he uses when he manipulates tools and builds things, it's all very harmonious. His relationships are harmonious. It all like they all fit together. He fits things together. When High Evolutionary builds things, he breaks stuff. He breaks more things than
he breaks them.
Right.
We talk about this a lot. Like I think you and I have talked about this privately. That like every once in a while, creators kind of fall into two camps: your builders and your destroyers. And the trick is to kind of be both. You have to be both a little bit. You have to break things a little bit and then build things, but you need to build. You have to always build. I think comics are at its best when they're building.
Yeah.
You know, also the thing about High Evolutionary versus Rocket is, and this is actually a thing about being creative in general. High Evolutionary was looking for perfection,
right?
And perfection isn't real.
Exactly.
I believe that true creativity is actually fairly sloppy, and it doesn't look perfect.
Yeah.
And you know that about paintings. Like when you look at paintings, and I think I told you this before. Have I ever talked about the Apple thing, like my Apple theory about being creative?
No, I don't think so.
If you take 10 creators, 10 artists, I'm going to start with artists. You take 10 artists, you put them in a room, and you say, I want all of you to draw an apple. I'm not even going to give you an apple to draw. It's not life draw. I want you to draw an apple. We all know what an apple looks like, draw an apple. All 10 artists are going to draw that apple differently. You might have some that draw it the same. You might get somebody like Alex Ross, where you're like, holy shit, that's the greatest looking apple I've ever seen. Like that guy drew an apple in his life. Yeah. But you might get somebody like Scotty Young, and the apple looks totally different. There's like a worm coming out of it. You know, there's all kinds of stuff. I know that's what Scotty would do.
Right, totally.
And you go down the line, all these artists draw it differently, right? What's fascinating is some people, they'll look at everything except the perfection as wrong.
Yes.
They will look at that apple. If it doesn't look exactly like an apple is supposed to look like, that is a mistake.
That's right.
Everything else is a mistake. But the rest of them are creative. And some of us might see them, you know, this is when you go to a museum and you might look at all these different paintings. You will find beauty in different things. We all see things differently. We all come from different perspectives, different experiences. So we're going to look at those different pieces of art different. And we're all going to go into that room. Now, if you get a bunch of people to go into that room and you have 10 drawings of apples differently, people are going to react to those apples differently.
Yep.
And what's beautiful about art is when people have true art appreciation or true creative inspiration, you go in there and you look at it, an appreciation of these things, you look at it and you can find something in all 10 that is of value, you know? But some people go in there and they go, nope, only the one that looks like a life-to-life drawing is correct.
Yes.
Look at Frank Miller's art. Frank Miller does not draw people looking like they're people. He is not a life drawing artist, right? And you know this about a lot of different artists throughout the line. You look at Chris Samnee, you look at all these guys, all different styles. No one is drawing exactly the same. What's fascinating is I feel the same way about writing, and I feel the same way about being a creator, just being a creative person in general. And I think this is the one of the things I find challenging sometimes about being a creator is how often I find people who only want the perfect drawing.
Yes.
And they're not able to look at the rest and see something else. But what's funny is that it's only in the moment. Like Brian De Palma talked about this in a documentary where he was talking about how he wished movies in particular, were not judged so much in the moment. Because in the moment, judging things in the moment is funny because so much of it comes from a place of bias, but also what you're doing in that moment, right? Like, I'm sure there are movies that I have seen that I didn't like parts because I was in a bad mood.
Right.
You know, or I had a bad movie going experience, which is not the fault of the thing. Like, it's always funny to me when I'll see a review of a book or a movie on Amazon and they're like, I don't like this because the packaging got damaged in my house. I'm giving it a
it's like that's not a review of the product.
Judging the shipping, not the product. It's always weird, right? I see this all the time.
Yep.
And it's very funny with that stuff. But so with writing, I think looking for perfection is always a mistake.
Yes.
And I recognize it about my own writing. Like, I recognize that I am the kind of writer that I can be a little sloppy at times, but I think that's actually part of what can be called style. And I think that's what's funny about a lot of writers that, you know, it's funny, like if you get these writers, if everyone started writing and drawing the perfect apple, it would be so boring.
It would be.
There'd be no variety. And so I find it always fascinating when I do see criticism of just stuff, not just comics, but movies, television, anything, art in general. And people are talking about they want it to be one specific way. Yes. And I'm like, you're all looking at that apple. Now, to bring it back to Guardians of the Galaxy, that is to me what High Evolutionary was. He was aiming for perfection. And because he was aiming for perfection, and to him, perfection was this, not even abstract, it was like this idea he had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not even sure it was his idea. It was something that was told to him. You know, it's like, this is what this needs to be. It's this perfect idea. Rocket was creative, and you can see this throughout the movies. Rocket is obviously creative, but he's also a little sloppy at times. Like there are moments where it doesn't work perfect, right? Or there are moments where it takes a second, or it's a little rough.
Yeah.
You know, like if you look at a lot of stuff Rocket was designing, it was a little rough at times. You
Absolutely.
know, like he wasn't building everything to be this
perfectly functional,
like, aesthetically pleasing, perfect thing.
No, it never looks good. It's functional.
It's functional, and I don't think it has to be functional. But I mean, even the stuff he did, but then it would be cool, you know.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing. It's funny how we have these conversations sometimes with other creators about like what is, you know, you have people who I think they make these books that are very technically sound, but they're missing something. They're missing those like cool elements, and some of those cool elements can be a little bit different. But creative comes from that process, you know, and not. It's funny because you have these conversations every once in a while. People talk about new, but when you're trying to introduce new elements, sometimes people get, let's put this, they reject them because it doesn't look like what they expect. They don't recognize it as new because it's new. And you know what I mean? It takes a minute. And that's what I was saying about De Palma, where De Palma was like, he wished people could take a step back and give things a little more room to breathe. You look at something like John Carpenter's The Thing, when it came out, people were like, this movie's garbage. Now we're like, this movie's classic.
Yes.
And I think, as we discussed with Hook, you know, it's like, Hook is this, you know, I find it fascinating that Hook is always looked at as Steven Spielberg's like one of his bad movies. But if you look at it now and you're like, no, this is a good movie.
No,
and
I think,
it's great. It's awesome.
Yeah. No, Crystal Skull is the bad movie. Is the worst movie he made.
Let's not be too hard on Crystal Skull. No, what I should have said is I should have been like, what's Crystal Skull?
What? No.
Yeah, I was watching this interview with Ty West. He's a director, and he was talking about how when he was a kid, he only knew about Raiders.
Oh.
He didn't know about any of the other movies. This is kind of my experience too. I actually saw Temple of Doom first.
Oh, so you might like Temple of Doom a lot.
Yeah. Well, I like Temple of Doom, but it's like I saw it first, and then one day I was at somebody's house, and they were like, "Oh, you like Indiana Jones? Watch this!" And they put on Raiders, and I was like, "What? What is this?" Like, it blew my mind. Something has to do with cable. I think when we were kids, like we were catching things on cable, so you'd miss it. Also, those things were edited. Yeah, you know, it's like Beetlejuice. Like for a long time, every time I saw Beetlejuice, it was always
the TV
like
version.
after on television, and so I would always catch it usually like after they had died. And so it was always like I always missed the beginning part, and then when I finally got on tape and I put it in, and I was watching the very beginning where they actually have like a little cold open with Beetlejuice, I was like, "What is this?"
Right, like is this the director's cut?
Yeah. Oh, trust me. Yeah, like all that stuff. You're like, what is it? But anyway, so I think that's the thing I think about with High Evolutionary, where I'm like, he was looking for perfection, and because he was so focused on perfection, it made it so he couldn't be creative. He couldn't be a genius, and Rocket was creative. And I think that's part of the dynamic. But yeah, when you're watching it, all these little pieces come together, and Rocket's cool.
Yeah, that's kind of funny to think about how that could be, if that is what Gunn's trying to say. That Gunn is talking about working within the corporate structure of movie making, where he's like, I'm trying to be creative and they're trying to reach this perfection, like working within the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, itself. I think that
I don't think he's doing that, but I think, you know,
I think almost everything you watch has an element of that. There's always, because you are, I mean, that's even the thing with, you know, when you're working on any kind of big two book, you know, it is an element of you do have to work within a framework.
Exactly.
You know, and good or bad, there are parameters there you have to work within. I always see those parameters now as like a challenge. You know, I welcome it. You know, it's like, give me the guideline and I'll work within that. And then you can find creative. It forces you to be creative.
Exactly.
Right? Like, this is a weird example I'm about to use. I was talking about this with Snyder a few weeks ago, and it was like, it's kind of like how, you know, before you went to the video store and you had this like limited selection of movies. You had to pick one, and it was definitely difficult, but you kind of would land on stuff you might not land on before.
Totally.
But now with Netflix plus every single streamer, you have so many options. You can get like frozen. Yeah. Of like, what am I watching tonight? Like, I have a list on my phone, so if that ever happens, I'm like, nope, I know what I'm watching. I'm putting this on because I have it on a list. And I feel that way about some of the stuff where it is like, by having almost too many options, it stops you from triggering. I mean, look at the Lord of the Rings movies, right? Yeah. Like when you look at the first Lord of the Rings movie, um, the budget wasn't as big. It was still huge,
Sure.
huge budget, but it wasn't as big as the second two, because you could tell. But Peter Jackson had to do movie making trickery
Yes.
to make that work, and that trickery forces you to be creative, try to figure out how to make this. Same thing with Sam Raimi. You look at old Sam Raimi movies. I mean, you look at the first Spider-Man movie. You look at Spider-Man 2, particularly. You can see all of these like Sam Raimi tricks.
Yes.
To conserve your budget,
right.
Basically, right? Like you have to, you can't spend millions and millions of dollars on this one thing. You have $1 million on this one thing. So you're like, okay, how do I make this work? Not the total budget of the movie, but every big like special effects shot, set piece, everything costs so much money. You have to find a way to trick the reader. It is magic, and it comes so much from like all these things have origins in stage shows and theater and tricking people and magic tricks essentially in a lot of ways, right? And so you have to kind of find ways of manipulating the audience through these tricks. And
exactly.
So, but that creates limitations. You have to be creative with those limitations. And I think that's the stuff that I find when I look at a lot of movies. I love when you can see that. Yeah. You can see that they were trying things. And I always appreciate, I talk about this a lot with other creators. I appreciate like thoughtfulness.
Yes.
Where you can tell they thought about it and they didn't just go, oh, throw money at it. I don't think about it. And it's something that, everyone you can tell in the work they're doing, you can see, especially in movie. I think movies and television show is way more than this. Movies, particularly comics, is a little different, but you can see those limitations and trying to be like, okay, I can't do this, but I can do this. And,
the example I would think of is it's Aliens when they're like, we need 12 pods.
Oh yeah,
and they're like, well, we only have money for 6 pods, and he's like, all right, 6 pods and a mirror.
Yeah, dude.
Now I got 12 pods.
Well, remember they originally in that movie, it was like, and same with Jaws. Yeah, it didn't look right.
Right,
like having the alien didn't look right.
Yeah, just shoot around them and make them
shoot around and make it scarier. Yeah, those limitations actually made it better. And that's the thing about Jaws is that in Jaws, they always has to come back around to Spielberg. Jaws, when they were doing Jaws, because Bruce the shark wouldn't work, they had to do extra shots. They had to do extra scenes with the family, with the stuff going on in the town, and it makes it a much
makes
better
it a masterpiece
movie.
Instead of just a
it makes it a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Jordan Peele always talks about this about how like B movies, like you want B movies that are elevated, and that's what Jaws is. The B movie is elevated. Yeah. And since then, don't get me wrong, like I actually really like the Meg movie, and that trailer for the second Meg movie looks really fun. Yeah. But there's a reson why that is like a big. There's a difference between that. And Jaws.
There's a difference with the Meg. And
no knock on the Meg. I like the movie, but you know what I mean. Like, there's a difference because of what they could do with CG and stuff versus.
Well, and the approach, like there's no scene in the Meg that is a unspoken metaphor between what it's like to be a father and a son, which was the scene of Roy Scheider and his son, and they're doing the
and that was not in the script. They just
no way. Yeah, exactly.
They just caught it. Like that was just like Roy Schneider just playing with that kid.
Exactly.
Keep rolling. Yeah. Well, Spielberg talked about that a lot with kid actors. The trick is you kind of let them do their thing. Let them get comfortable, and then you just keep rolling. Because kids will reveal themselves, and I'm curious about that with like Stranger Things, because it's like I'm sure those kids have become friends at this point, and there's moments where you just like get them in a room and let them record for a little bit, and they'll probably give you some magic.
Something really good, because those kids are also really talented.
But I think that's the same with Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, I think that cast knows each other so well by the ending. It's like they built this kind of dynamic.
Yes,
brings it around, but. Since we've talked so much about being creative, I can talk about the sad story.
Naturally, yes. So in 2012, almost 20 years ago, a little more than 20 years ago.
2012?
10 years ago, I'm sorry. Jesus.
10 years ago. Oh, my God.
11 years ago. There was a period when you thought your time in comics
I thought I was done. Man, where do I begin? Okay, so I'm going to rewind a bit. We're actually going to, I'm going to tell, I'm going to start 2011. You know it? Yeah, I'm going to start 2011. Yeah, I have to think about this. Whew. All right. So, in 2011, I was making books. Like I had done some graphic novels, and I had a couple books coming out. Like I had an image book that was coming out, and I had done the Uncharted comic book for Wildstorm / DC. Yeah. And I had been doing all of these like short stories. So I would do like a little 8-pager here, a 10-pager there. I was doing these things. They're called inventory for DC, where it's like they basically hire you for test comics, and it's like, oh, if this it's a good place to test people out and then decide, are you going to put them on something else? And, you know, it lets you know how they are as a creator. And then they can slot it in. They used to slot them in, you know, like it'd be a thing where like, oh, we have a problem with the schedule. We're going to put this issue in, you know, to help out. And so I did a couple of those. I did them for mostly for Batman Superman, like mostly for the Batman Superman book. And like I did an issue with Damian and Supergirl. That was one of them. But I did a few of them. That was the one that actually got published, was that one. But there were a couple other ones that just I got paid for them and they got put in a drawer. But that, again, they're just test runs. Yeah. And so I done that. I did a couple things here and there. I had good relationships with people at DC. I liked that. I was pitching for all these different books. I had pitched for a bunch of different stuff and talking to them. But again, I had like a good relationship with DC.
Yeah.
And but I was doing stuff at Image, and I had conversations with like Skybound and conversations with Dark Horse. Like it was definitely like, but things were slow. Like this was really early on.
Right.
And remember, like my whole life, I wanted to work for DC Comics. Like I love Marvel. I really love Image. I love Creator and all, but I had this goal of DC.
Yeah.
And then New 52 happened. And here's the thing about New 52. I had so many friends. So like it wasn't a secret among creators, right? Before it was announced. Like they were reaching out to people because obviously like, oh, this guy, you know, like Scott's gonna do Batman.
Yep.
You know, Grant's gonna do Superman. And you know, they were going out to people.
Yeah.
And I had a few friends that were all getting hired on to do different books. And I would hear about them like at a convention. Somebody like, oh man, they just offered me this book, or oh, you know, we would be talking about this on the phone. Oh, they offered me this, and this guy's doing this guy's doing this. And it was a lot of big names, but there were a lot of creators that I felt, and I think I was wrong, but a lot of creators I thought were at my level. Like I was at their level. But I think they were all like a step ahead of me in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And again, I had good relationships with everybody. And I was pitching, and like I've been waiting on Nailbiter from Vertigo to find out if it was accepted or not. And it was just it was a weird time. Yeah. And every day they announced like you know, New 52 was kind of, I don't want to say rushed, but you know, I think we all know the story. So as everyone was getting jobs, I was like, well, I should get a call. Yeah, because I'm doing books at DC. I'm doing stuff. And I had relationships with them. Yeah,
you have your foot in the door. What's the point of not going through the door if I got my foot in it? Come on.
Yeah, I definitely have my foot in the door. And but again, I thought I had a really good relationship with them. And when I look back at it, I recognize I wasn't ready. That was definitely part of it. I wasn't ready.
Gotcha.
But when that was announced, I feel like part of my brain broke. Like when New 52 was like fully announced, it was fully up and running. Like that San Diego.
Yeah.
I was talking to editorial a lot, and I did talk to them about like potentially doing stuff in New 52 and working on these books.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. It wasn't coming together. And I feel like I will always look back at that moment in 2011. I was also going through a divorce when this was happening.
So could have been, things may have seemed a little more dire or skewed.
Yeah, there's lots of going on in my head. And I think, you know, my brain just broke at some point in that, you know, and I definitely was like in a not a great place when it came to a lot of stuff. And so when we get around to New York Comic Con, you know, I'm there and everyone's like celebrating New 52 and it just launched. And everyone's doing their books. And I was hanging out with them because I'm friends with all of them. So I was hearing all these stories, hearing all this stuff, editorial. I'm still hanging out with editorial. You know,
and that has to be but that has to be like internally demoralizing because everyone's like, yeah, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And you're like, yeah, guys, and I'm not. Like it's just me and all of you. Like,
yeah, and I think there was some definitely maturity issues that I had during that time period too. Like I feel like I wasn't there on multiple levels, but like, I remember we did the signing. They did this signing for basically New 52, and I was like hanging out with my friends, and it was definitely like I am not a part of this.
Yes,
you know, I'm here, I'm listening, right, but I was also so desperate to be a part of it, and I was a big piece of it. I was so desperate of like I just want to be here, and I didn't really focus in on the stuff you need to focus in on as a creator of like, well, what am I actually? What's the story I want to tell? What characters do I want to work on? Like, what do I actually have to say? And I was still in that zone where I felt like I was very much like a mimic. Like I hadn't figured out who I was as a creator. I hadn't figured out my voice yet, and I hadn't figured out what I wanted to do yet. And so at New York Comic Con, I'm just like talking to the editors. I'm at the offices, like everything, right? And then about a week or two after, I get this call from the editor, and they're like, "We're gonna give you Voodoo. You're gonna take over Voodoo, and they're like, you're gonna do Voodoo.
Of the
Basically, here's
Wildstorm
the
fame from
from
Wildstorm.
Wildstorm. Yeah, they're like, in here, it was already running,
Yeah.
and they were like, here's the outline, basically. Here's what you're gonna do. And I was like, great, let's go. Just because I was so desperate.
So hyped. You've been ramped up over the last
but
couple of weeks.
But I was like, I just want to be in the building.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it didn't matter what it was. I wanted to be in the building.
Right, yeah.
And so I got it. But again, I just want to work with DC Comics. And I see this as an opportunity to now be in the conversation. Now I'm in the meeting now. Again, this is like end of 2011. This is toward the end, right? So I get the job, and I start working on it. And again, I have a good relationship with editorial. I'm getting along with editorial. I'm getting along with my editors and creators. And Sammy Basri, who's this like amazing artist, is drawing it. He's crazy talented. And like I was having a good time, but I was also just kind of doing what I was told. Like that was a big piece of it.
I see. So yeah, they were handing you things, you were taking them.
But this is not a knock on anyone that was in editorial at that time. And
no, of course.
It was just like I was also very young, not just in terms of as a person, but I was also young as like a creator. I had done a bunch of stuff for other publishers, but it was like still trying to figure things out. And I was a little bit too much of a people pleaser in that moment. And I think there were certain things about what I wanted from DC that I was also afraid of asking for, right? Which we'll get to that in 2012. So then I'm in 2012 comes around. And I'm working on Voodoo. I'm also doing I'm still doing fillers. I'm still doing inventory. I'm doing whatever they give to me.
Yep.
And I was working on stuff, and I had already written the first 5 issues of Ghosted. So Ghosted was a creator book I was working on.
Yeah.
And I had started working on it. And that in a lot of ways felt like the most me, but I didn't think that's what people wanted. I was thinking way too much about what I thought people wanted and what I thought was expected of me. And I wasn't thinking enough of like me as a creator, what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And actually just being, having fun, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I was having fun going to conventions and stuff, hanging with my friends. And now I'm like, cool, I'm working on this stuff and we're talking about things and we're talking about potential crossovers. And I'm talking to creators about using their characters in Voodoo, and they want to use Voodoo for something, and having this good relationship with editorial. And like that year is kind of a bit of a blur, right? Because it was like I was mostly working on that and a couple of little things here and there. I had little jobs and stuff. Now, my first job ever for the big 2 was one thing was for Marvel in 2008, and then I would pitch for Marvel stuff occasionally, and then in 2009 was my first DC job. So from 2009 to 2011, I would do little things. I always had something. It might take some time, but little stuff. So you get to the end of 2012, you go to New York Comic Con, and Voodoo's canceled. All that I had known it was canceled since like San Diego.
Okay.
And I had been talking to editorial about stuff, and just nothing was coming together. And so one day, New York Comic Con, and I remember walking around and being like I'll get another job. I'll get another comic job. I'll get something. But I think the reality was that I didn't recognize at the time it wasn't that I was doing what I was told. I wasn't. And again, this is no knock on anyone else. It's all me. I wasn't doing a good job. Like that's the reality, right? Like I wasn't necessarily doing my best work. But again, I was just so happy to be there.
Yes.
I was just like, yes, I work at DC Comics, and that was the goal.
And that was part of my mistake. The cosmetic nature of being in the building, not how you got in the building, and not what you do now that you're in the building.
Yes, and not doing good story. Exactly. Like, I mean, that was, and not trying my hardest. It was like, well, the goal has been accomplished. And this is part of what, again, like some of the stuff with Birthright is actually about, is like what happens when you get what you want, and what happens next,
Yeah.
And how life can throw you curveballs, which we'll get into that in a minute. But so I go to New York Comic Con 2012, and I am just like slowly becoming aware that like I'm out of work.
We're getting that slow push in from Jaws where it's like, oh, dude. No. Yeah.
So I go to the office. I go to the offices the Monday after New York Comic Con, and I go to all the editors I know, and I'm talking to them, and I can just tell it's like that sad, no one wants to say it thing, right?
Sure.
Like, you are out.
Yeah.
And no one wants to straight out say it to me. Nobody wants to say it. And I remember I had a meeting with this editor and his assistant, and they were like, they did ask, what do you want to do? And I, in that moment, and this is the part of me that was scared, I thought, they're never going to give me anything big. They're not going to give me Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Justice League, anything like that.
Yeah.
Nothing. Flash, whatever. Like, they're not going to give me anything big. And so I was like, I want to work on a demon comic. And this is not a knock on the demon. I actually really love the demon.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I learned from this lesson was that, like, a new creator pitching a demon series is a non-starter.
Yeah.
If I pitch a demon now, or like Tom King or Scott Snyder, you know what I mean, or James is like, I want a demon, they're like, okay, cool, we'll listen.
Yeah, we'll hear the pitch at least.
We'll hear the pitch, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a brand new person, Stephen Wacker said this one time. He was like, we have the guidebook too. Like, we have it too. Like, they can look through the guidebook and go, what characters don't have books? You know, they can do it too.
Yeah.
You can't just, as a creator, go through and go like, what does have a book right now? Oh, like the demon doesn't have a comic, so I'm gonna pitch the demon. That's not necessarily how it works. And I
Gotcha.
one of those I learned in that process was that, like, oh, well, if you it's easier to say I would like to write a Superman story, and they're like, cool, let's do an inventory. We have anthologies,
right?
You know, we have these opportunities to help you out. Or, oh, you want to do a Green Lantern thing? Oh, okay, let's do like a Green Lantern mini or a one shot. Or, hey, you know, maybe we need a filler issue. It's easier to do than that. And so I just basically, a long story short, in that moment, I blew that meeting completely.
Sure, yeah, and that was, and what you didn't know is that's just the only meeting you're going to get at DC.
That was probably it. Yeah, that was my last chance, basically.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking around, I see Dan, I see these people, and I just tell, like, I'm becoming that person in the office that's just there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, all right, I gotta go. And so I start walking out, and I run into somebody. I'm not gonna say who they are, because I actually like this person a lot. I told this story before, and I said who it was. So if somebody wants to find out, they can probably find
pick
out
through it. And yeah,
but it was somebody very, very high up at DC at the time. Not a writer, to be clear. And they saw me, and I got along with them. And they basically, you know, they were like, "Oh, are you heading out?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm leaving." Like, cool, I'll walk you out. And so they walk me out, and I get to the streets of New York, and they basically like pat me on the shoulder and gave me a good luck, kid, and then closed the door. And I remember standing there being like, "Did I just get fired?"
Right?
I got fired. Like, I was not just out, but it was like
they kicked you out. Like
you're out.
Yeah, like you're out the door. Oh, you're the door shut behind you. You're on the mean streets of New York City. It's like, it's cold.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah.
And so I went, I went home. And again, this is October of 2012.
Yeah.
So I go home and I take stock. I go, okay, what work do I have right now? And I was like, okay, I finished Ghosted in August.
Yep.
Captain Midnight hadn't started, and I didn't know who was going to start. I had wrote like a 3-parter that was going to be in Dark Horse Presents, but I wasn't sure if it was. I actually hadn't finished it, so I wasn't sure if Captain Midnight was actually going to happen or not.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so it's October, and I'm just sitting there being like, oh man, I am out of work. Yeah. And not only am I out of work, but that thing that I thought I wanted, I blew it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say taken away from me. I blew it.
Sure.
So it was like,
right, because
I had wanted.
They met you halfway. They were like, well, gimme. It was almost like, maybe they weren't even taking pitches. They just were like, let's, he's in the room. Let's hear him.
What do you got?
What do you got? What has he got? What has he got in the tank? He's got to feel it by now. And
man, after that, it was really hard. And again, like I was going to be broke.
Right.
It was like, no work, no money. I had been basically working. What's that? Oh, I just got divorced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So new home, I assume. Like you're just.
No, I moved into an apartment in Portland. It was great. I really liked it. I had life in a lot of other ways was good, but it was definitely a weird moment in life of change.
Yeah.
Right. Where it was like a lot of disappointment, a lot of things, and in a lot of ways, with DC and some other things, it was just very, very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it got worse from there, to be really honest with you. It was like, because I had built all these friendships in comics that, I'll be really honest with you, they all disappeared. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people I was friends with, not all of them. I still had some friends in that moment, but a lot of people I would talk to on the regular who either worked at DC or worked in comics in general, they just stopped talking to me.
Yeah.
It was like I was a pariah suddenly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I understand some of that is because it's like, when you're in it, you oftentimes are talking about stuff that is like company secrets. And
Exactly.
you can't, I became this like unknown factor in that. But dude, I mean, literally, like people who I would talk to on the regular suddenly just stopped taking my calls.
Ghosted.
And
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, ghosted me like crazy. And there were some editors too. And some editors were still talking, but I could tell I was like an annoyance is the best way to
Yes.
put it.
Yeah.
And so it was that, but also a lot of creators. I mean, again, they just stopped talking to me, completely stopped talking to me. And that was really hard because it was like, you think they're your friends. And then it's like, oh, well, now they're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you get closer and closer to Christmas. And I remember having this moment. It was Thanksgiving. And I was alone on Thanksgiving, and I was like, man, I got invited to a couple other creators that were having a dinner, so someone hung out with them, but it was all couples, and me as like the one single guy who's also broke, and I'm just like so thankful because like they're cooking dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not going out to dinner. You're not. You don't have to chip in. It's just kind of like,
oh no, man. It was a moment where I had just like not been smart that year. So
right.
You're doing for the end of the year, and I'm like, and then I'm really thankful I happened to get royalties on Uncharted. And those royalties, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna take me through the rest of the year. But then I need to figure something out.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what I was gonna do. And I remember on Christmas, I went home to see my family on Christmas, my birthday. My birthday's right before Christmas.
Oh, cool.
And there was this moment, it was just me by myself in my grandma's guest room on my birthday. Eating McDonald's for dinner and just being like, man, I was getting closer and closer to rock bottom.
Yeah.
Right. Like I could feel it. And I wasn't really sure what the future held, but I knew that something that was really important to me was gone.
Yeah.
It was things that like, and again, I always struggle talking about careers. And part of why I say that is because of the history of comics. Like comics can be really unpredictable. It's like you could be real high and then real low, real fast. And there are people we've seen who are legends who suddenly come crashing down and not for any fault of their own. At the moment I don't want to use the word angry. I don't want to say angry. And I don't want to say sad, but I definitely was in like a weird mental headspace when this was happening.
Bitter. Like there's kind of
bitter. Bitter is even tough too because it's like I guess I can say bitter. Now I look back at it and I'm like, no. See, I messed up. Like I take responsibility for the stuff that happened.
Exactly. No, you weren't. You didn't hold any grudges, but even in that moment, you weren't holding grudges. You were just kind of like you were in a depressive state. You're just like, this
and dude, and it was hard because the friends that I did have in comics, I could see
them
what was happening. Like they not just the retreating, but then other people who I was still talking to were like leveling up, continuing to get better books.
They're lapping you.
Yeah, they're continuing. Yeah, it was definitely on my left. Like everybody was just like, everybody was moving up in ways that
those folks who got those gigs that you were like, but we were all kind of on the same page. How come I was passed over and you weren't for New 52?
And they're just unhappy for them, to be clear.
Of course, but we should all be in the same. We should all be in the same heat. Now it's like, they're not only passing, but they're surpassing.
Yeah, and I'm still and I was very happy for them, but it was more of a like. I wanted to be included still.
Yeah, of course.
Like that was part of it. Was like I still wanted to be in the room. Like it's part of why I don't get any kind of FOMO now because then I had it so bad and I saw how destructive it could be on a creative level. Right. And and so you get around like January and February and I was able to pick up some work here and there, but I was like, oh, this is gonna be rough. And this is why I was talking about this last time. I was talking so much about the belly of the whale because that's how I felt. I felt extremely isolated. From friends, from family, from like the creative community. Like I felt extremely isolated, and in some ways not by choice, but then it became by choice. I started retreating because I was like, I need to figure something out.
Right.
Like I messed up, and these are the ways I messed up. And in some ways, I became cockier in that moment too. Like I think if I look back at 2013 and in some parts 2014, I feel like there's definitely parts of my brain where I was a little jaded about it, maybe a little bit.
Right, like
A
I
little
was
more
in the
like,
I was in the industry. I know what it's like, but
yeah,
it'll chew
but
you up and spit you out. Comics will break your heart.
yeah, I was a little bit like that.
Right.
And it was just like a really really hard time. And
Yeah.
What happened was, and this is about again, I think why it's good to kind of shed your ego sometimes, but it's good to have one. I think to a certain extent because it can help you. But I do think at times it's good to shed it. But like years before, I had done some jobs for Ben Abernathy, who's now executive editor, but then
Yeah.
was group editor. I think he was senior editor at the time, actually. But I did this job for him where it was a General Mills job, where it was a serial comics. You would do these like comics for serial and stuff. And I did one, and there were 4 of them. I did one of them, and General Mills was really happy with me. Warner Brothers, DC, Wildstorm were really happy with me. Ben was really happy with me, and I loved it. It was fun. I actually turned in the script for that on my 30th birthday, and it was the first time I ever wrote Batman, like wrote Batman dialogue. And
That's cool.
But it was always, yeah. And so 2 years later, I think General Mills and Warner Brothers, like Wildstorm, they reach out to me and they're like, "Do you want to do that again?" And man, this is the beginning of 2013, and I was like, "Yes, like I will do that again. Let's go." And they were like, "You have to write," and I was like, "Can I write all 4 of them?" And they were like, "Actually, that's why we're calling you. We want you to do all 4, but you have to do all 4 of them in the month of March. You got to knock them out." And I was like, "Let's rock."
Yeah.
And on a life note, one of the things that was really great was I had also, purely from a more personal level, I realized that where I was in a lot of ways, I wasn't really valuing myself as a person, but also as a creator. And I needed to like take a step back from everything. That's part of why I was isolating myself for a while.
Yeah.
And I've always been comfortable being alone, so I don't have a problem with that. But I definitely recognize I needed to like retreat, go into the belly of the whale, and reflect.
Yes.
Right. And have a moment of like, what am I doing wrong, and try to grow, but away from everybody. Right as I was coming out of that is actually when I met my wife. And she's amazing. And one of the things that was really great in that time period was because of her job at the time, she basically, I couldn't see her during the week. I could only see her on the weekends. And I think for both of us in that moment, it really helped with our relationship. That's kind of how it was. It definitely helped us sort of be ourselves at the beginning of a relationship. A lot of times you dive in so hard, but it allowed us to kind of still maintain our independence as we were getting to know each other.
Yeah.
But also because my work schedule started to ramp up. And so then it's March. It's March. I got that job at General Mills. So I did that. And then I was like, that's it. There's no more DC work. Like I don't see it coming. I don't have it. I went and like I started working on Nailbiter. I had been working on Nailbiter. Now here's one of the kicks for Nailbiter. Nailbiter actually got rejected at the beginning of 2012.
Really?
Like it was rejected. I pitched to Vertigo. They rejected it once at the beginning of 2012. The beginning.
Yeah.
And when I was at DC again at the end of 2012, we started talking about it again. Like, hey, we might consider it again. And I was like, great, that's awesome. They rejected it again. So that was what I thought was my last chance at DC. And they were like, nope, you're out. Like again, I'm out, completely out. Yep. And so, I started working on Nailbiter. I pitched Birthright by accident almost to Skybound because Ghosted was working and they're like, well, do you want to do anything next? And I'm like, well, I have this idea for this book. I just kind of bullshit the book idea.
Yeah.
While walking the floor of WonderCon, like looking through the bins at back issues, I tell Sean Makowitz, who's now publisher of Skybound, but at the time was editor. I told him then, I'm like, oh, I have this idea for this book. And I told it to him. And then like a week later, he calls me and he's like, do you want to do it?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, let's go. I was like, are you sure it's 50 issues long? And he was like, yeah, we want to do all 50. And I'm like, all right, let's go. So, I suddenly, you get around to like San Diego Comic-Con time, and it was like Ghosted launches, does well. And it's the first time I feel like that's really a little bit more of me on the page. I'm still learning, I'm still figuring some stuff out, but Ghosted comes out. Captain Midnight launches. It actually did work out, and so that launches.
Yeah, you got 25 issues at Midnight, so it's like...
Yeah, I did, yeah. And then I get it was 2 years. It was good, and I learned a lot from that, too.
I'll bet, yeah.
I feel like I was always training in the field. This is one of the things I learned about this from Time Bro. I always felt like I was training in the field. And so that happens, and then Dark Horse is like, "Do you want to do a Predator book?" And then Boom was like, "Do you want to do
RoboCop.
RoboCop?" Like all these things started coming together, and
I didn't
I
know you
remember
did a
being,
Predator
and this is
book.
before RoboCop. What's that?
Did you do a Predator book? I don't remember you doing a Predator book.
Yeah, I did a 4-issue Predator book. Yeah. It was part of a big crossover with Prometheus, Alien,
Oh, it was
Predator,
the.
Alien
Oh,
vs.
I see.
Predator.
That's why I missed it. Okay,
Yeah. It was part of the whole thing.
Fire and Stone. Yeah, okay.
Yes, dude. Yeah. I have the hardcover art somewhere. Like big omnibus they did.
I think I have it on the shelf. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was working.
But you're working and on like high profile stuff too. So it's
but I also was like figuring out who I was.
Yeah.
Like I was still learning in the field. I feel like
no one's telling you, no one's dictating. You're just like, this is me. This is what I've got.
Yeah. And I was having fun, and that actually goes back to something we were talking about High Evolutionary, where it was like, I'm not aiming for perfection. I'm not trying to be technical. I'm doing my own thing and having fun. And then Nailbiter got picked up. What's funny is Birthright had been in motion. It's so weird with Birthright and Nailbiter, because Birthright had been in motion 6 months before Nailbiter got picked up by Image. Yeah. But then Birthright actually came out almost 6 months after Nailbiter did, number one.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
But worked out. I feel like that was actually the right sequence. Yeah. But Nailbiter, I felt like, because Nailbiter was rejected by so many publishers, and it was the one in my gut. And some of it was like, one publisher didn't like Mike's art, but I was like, no, Mike's the guy. It's Mike. Mike is the guy. And I just remember being like, no, Nailbiter is it. I could feel it in my gut. This is the book. This is the book. Yeah. This is the book. So it, it actually, comes out. Nailbiter comes out. So now we're into like 2014. So Nailbiter comes out, but I have like zero connection to DC other than a couple of creators, a couple of editorial.
Well, and Ben Abernathy, right? Like you did the
no, Ben Abernathy left.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
he left. He left DC and he went to Mayfire. He actually left both. He left. I want to say he left probably right after Uncharted was done. So he was pretty much gone by the time I was really in there. I think I told you before, I had pitched him a Green Arrow thing back in 2010, and a big part of that is in the Green Arrow book now. But it was weird because I still felt a little bit outside of comics in a weird way, right? And I was still kind of doing my own thing, but Nailbiter did well, Birthright did really well, Ghosted did really well, like Captain Midnight was doing well. But I did not really talk to anybody at DC. I had a few friends that were still kind of around. I would talk to them a little bit, but there's also, editorial changes, creator changes, turnover, all this stuff. And I just wasn't really there. This is also one of the reasons why I think, and I can be honest about this, is why usually too is like a little bit of a blind spot for me. Like I know it pretty well now, but it was like at the time I wasn't reading the books outside of Batman and Flash. Yeah. Part of it was because I was a little angry, I guess I could say that, and I was like, I'm not buying this.
Not reading their. They don't want me part of it. If you asked me what's
happening in Marvel in that time period, I could totally tell you. But I wasn't, I wasn't really reading a lot of stuff, and I was a little angry about things, and so I started getting a little Marvel work here and there too, and I started heading in that direction. I wasn't sure if that was the right fit, because I always felt like DC was home to me that I got kicked out of. And again, my mistake, right? Like I had messed up, but it still was like a part of my heart was gone, because it's like when you're thinking about like your childhood dreams and the things that you really want, and then you're like, oh, here's this goal I had, and I flew too close to the sun. Like I wasn't even there yet. You know what I mean? I had just like gotten like a foot off the ground and those wings melted, but because I built bad wings, and so that time was hard. So it was like I didn't work at DC for about 3 years. Yeah. And I was like, I'm never going back. Like it will, and I remember at the time being like, not only am I never going back, they're never going to let me back.
Right.
Like I felt like the door was closed. I made the decision, like, I'm not going back. And I was like, they're never going to take me back. Yeah. I would email editors and I would email a pitch. I think in 2013, I would email a couple pitches in and the editor would be like, I like this pitch. And I would never hear it. You know, so it's just like, oh, it's very clear that I am just not there. And I definitely felt like, you know, I always get a really bad vibe when I did talk to them. So I was like, this is never going to happen. I will
Yeah.
never work there again.
Well, and it's
And
demoralizing to
but
have to like throw yourself out there and know you're getting back like soft rejections, or even just kind of like not pity, but just kind of like a
oh, pity is probably the best way to put it,
then
dude.
there you
Like,
go,
I
like with
mean,
pity replies where it's like, oh,
yeah, I learned,
I'd rather you just
I was
ghost
like,
me
I
than fucking
will,
reply. Like,
yeah, I will never, yeah, don't be nice to me. That was it, you know. And I think I learned in that stuff of like you never beg. And I think I had a lot of emotional and maturity I needed to go through as well in
sure,
that time period. Like especially 2012 through 2015 particularly.
yeah,
Like I feel like I'm a drastically different person now than I was in that time period. And
totally,
thankfully, especially once I get around like 2013, 2014, and I think like obviously some personal life stuff sorted up and things got a lot better there, and it's
yeah,
like, finances, my wife is amazing, it's like all these things kind of came together. And then, but I was like, dude, I'm never going back, and they're never
yeah,
going to have me back. And I definitely felt like, oh, that was a dream that is gone.
yeah.
Like it is gone.
Now, did you?
And
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you then go time to make up some new dreams, now to come up with something new, or did you
Dude,
go
I
like,
was
all
allowed
right,
to create her own books.
yeah,
That was Nailbiter, that was Birthright, that was Ghosted. That was a lot of things I wanted to do. And I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to be working on create her own stuff.
yeah?
And I started heading in the Marvel direction because there were editors there that I liked, and there were creators there that obviously,
Right.
I've been influenced by, and I really
Well, and you
liked
did What
over
If
there.
and the
Yeah.
Illuminati and Red
The
Skull.
Illuminati, which we can talk about that, all this stuff. Yeah, because I really like, I like Hickman, I like this era. I really like Bendis. There were a lot of editors there that I really liked. Like at the time, Stephen Wacker, who's an editor I really had a lot of respect for. He was still there, and he gave me some harsh advice one time. I'm not gonna say what it was, but he gave me a talking to that I kind of needed in 2013
Gotcha.
a little bit. That actually kind of woke up some stuff in my brain. I mean, basically, he kind of was like, and this is the thing that how do I put this in the best possible way? It isn't. He is great, but he basically gave me the like, what are you bringing to the table conversation. Because I think a lot of creators are like, I made a comic book. That means I should get a job with the big two now. You know what I mean? I see
Yeah,
this
and it's
all.
like, well, how does that benefit me? Yeah.
Well, it's not just that, but it's like, yeah, a lot of people made comic books this year. Like, you have to add more, and a lot of times you have a story to tell. It's like I've learned this from other creators where they're like, they just kind of they want the job because it's the same problem I have. They see it as a status thing, not as a like I have a story to tell.
Right.
And I think that was something I learned from Wacker was like just showing up and saying, I want to write this character doesn't mean anything. Like, what's the story you want to tell? Like, what is the thing you were doing? And so him, but I really like Tom Brevoort a lot. I think Tom Brevoort's like one of the greatest editors of all time. And so I really wanted to work with him. And so I was going in that direction a little bit, but there was always this part of me that, again, I was like heartbroken, it was like the one that got away.
Yeah.
So you get around to like spring of 2015, and Scott Snyder comes up to me at a convention, and he is just like, you should try to come back. You should try to come back. You should try to come back to DC. And I was like, no.
Right.
It will never happen. And I'm telling Scott, Scott, as my friend, I'm telling you this, like, that will never happen. He's like, you should try. You should try. Like, I'll put in a word or whatever. And I was like, no, I don't need that.
Right.
Like, please don't. I'm not going back. And he was like, you should try. And I was like, all right, well, what do you think's available? And he was like, well, there's this, and he's like, I don't know, like, what do you want to do? And he was like, would you ever want to write Flash? And I was like, yeah, I love Flash. I would write Flash. I have Flash ideas. I have a story for Flash. I have all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it will never happen. It will never happen. But I had another friend who worked for DC. He didn't work in a creative space. He's a creative person, but he didn't work in a creative space. He worked in a different part of DC. He's like a genius. But he knew the sales of my books. This is a big piece of the puzzle.
Uh-huh.
He knew what the sales were on Nailbiter and Birthright and Ghosted. He knew the sales of them. He saw what the trades were selling. And how they were like the Nailbiter Volume 1 trade was in like the top 10. Birthright was number 1 the month it came out. There was like the trades were doing really, really well.
Yeah.
And he knew that. So he went to Dan and was like, listen, look at this. Look at this.
Yeah.
Like, we should try. And Dan was like, okay, we'll have a meeting. And so San Diego Comic-Con, I go meet with Dan. I told the story a million times. I meet with Dan.
Yes.
And
he takes you in the back. You're in that little space on
little
the floor.
room. I'm sweating.
You're in the booth. Because you had to run over there because you were behind.
I had to run. I was sweating. Yeah.
And then you just yelled at him for 10 minutes Dan, without breathing. Yeah. And he was
but
like, what?
He said no. And here's the thing, is he was like, oh, we have these one shots, we have this mini. It was basically 2011 all over again. It was like, we have these things. And I was like, no, I'll tell you what I want. I want the Flash and only the Flash. And that's it. If I don't get the Flash, there's no conversation. And I wasn't being asked about it, but I was like, this is it.
This is how because I feel.
To me, in that moment, in that moment, I'm like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I'm going to be here and you're asking me what I want now, I'm going to tell you for real.
Exactly.
I messed up before, but also as a creator and as a person, I had grown so much over those 3 years that I was like, no, this is what I want,
Exactly.
And Dan said no. And then he gave me notes, but then 3 months later, I went in and was also secretly in my back of my brain, I was like, I'm going back into New York Comic Con, and now it's 2015. So it's 3 years after I basically had been, out.
Yeah.
And I'm going in, and my wife's pregnant. We just got married. Now I find out like a few days before the question, this is pregnant. Ghosted is ending.
Yeah.
Had Ghosted had ended, actually. Ghosted had ended. Captain Midnight ended. I was doing books at Marvel, but it wasn't working out. And so I was like, oh man, I need to find an ongoing book at some point in this process.
Or it's going to happen all over again. Yeah.
Happen all over again. And I was so nervous about that. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to read the history? Part of being a creator and looking for these cycles is you also look for the cycles in real life.
Yeah.
And it can be terrifying when you're like, oh my God, am I about to thematically repeat something from 3 years ago?
Right. Am I going to be in my grandma's guest room again?
I know, dude. I was like, oh my God. So I go to, I have this meeting with Dan, and I much more, calmer meeting.
Yep.
And I pitch him Flash. This is what I want to do. And I remember, Speed Force Storm, the whole thing, right? Godspeed, all that stuff. And Dan slams his hand to death and he's like, let's do it. Oh. And I was like, wait, what? What's happening? And there was a whole process of getting there, but I remember I was in the building. I went there to visit. I was in LA to do other stuff. I was actually working on some stuff for Skybound at the time, and so I was in LA to do that. And there was a couple other things that were going on, but I was like, I'm gonna go by DC, and I actually got to meet with Dan for all of 2 minutes. But here's the thing about this story about meeting Dan. Dan is like, I need more time. And I was like, this is not gonna happen. This is it. And so here's the funny thing about this. So about repeating history. I was supposed to meet Dan at 3:30 in the offices in Burbank. I got there a little early, and I thought I was going to sit there outside of his office. He had these chairs, or just hang out for a minute,
Yeah.
I get there, I see Dan. Dan is like, how long are you in town for? And I'm like, I'm leaving tomorrow. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, I need a little more time. Just give me a little bit more time. And I was like, and it's on Tuesday. It was on a Tuesday. And he's like, are you here Thursday? And I'm like, no, I'm going to go home. I actually have a signing on Saturday on the other side of the country. So yeah, I'm not going to be here. And he was like, okay. But he was like, I need more time. But I'm thinking, oh man, he's stalling. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Again, my meeting with Dan was at 3:30. And he's like, what else you doing today? I was like, this is it. I'm just meeting you. And he was like, okay, great. Let me walk you out.
Oh,
and he walks me out of the Burbank building, gets me outside the building. And he's like, just give me some more time. We'll talk soon. He walks back in. And I'm standing outside the building. And what's funny is Dan was asking me questions that were very telling that I didn't realize. He's like, what's your schedule like? How are things going? How quick can you get scripts in? When can you work? All this stuff. And I was answering him like, well, I have room for this. I can do this, I can do that. I'm pretty open for this, this, and this. And he was like, okay. But dude, when I was standing outside the building, I looked at my phone, 3:29.
Ugh.
I was like, oh yeah, this is never happening.
Yeah, this is
what
this is the DC. This is the New York City meeting all over again. He just didn't pat you on the back.
Yeah. And so I went home, and then Thursday night, I got a call from DC. And what's funny is I recognize now what had happened was Dan was waiting until Thursday. I had a meeting on Thursday about it. And he didn't tell me that. And so when that meeting was over, it was like, hey, we actually need to get back here. How soon can you get back? And I was like, I can be back on Tuesday. It was a Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
And
okay.
they were like, can you come back? And I was like, yeah. So I flew in on Tuesday morning. I flew into LAX, went to Burbank, which is an awful drive.
Yes, it is.
I get to Burbank. I go in and I was nervous because not Dan, the editor told me, the editor was like, you're going to have to go and pitch your Flash plan to this entire room of people. So I'm super nervous about that. And I'm like, and dude, I remember that summer. So I'm going to rewind a little bit. That summer, even the prospect of working for DC again was challenging for me. Like, it was a bit of a, like, I don't want to say I was gun shy, but I definitely was like, am I willing to go through this again in a way?
Right.
And how do I approach this differently?
Yeah.
And I had to do a lot of, like, before even going to New York Comic Con and going to do any of this stuff and going back into working for DC, I had to do like a lot of soul searching. Is basically the best way to put it, of like, can I do this? And this is the thing I think you'll recognize. Like, when you're working at Marvel and DC, the pressure is very different. It's very intense. It's very hard. And Creator Owned has its own challenges, and I respect it. Obviously, I do it. I have friends that do it, and its own challenge. There is a machine that you are walking into is very different, and it can be really hard on people, and it can really try you in a way. Like, we talk about the grind, all that kind of stuff. It can be really just challenging. I'll put it like that on yourself. And I was like, am I willing to do this again? I was like, oh my God. So being there and being like, okay, now I have to go and pitch my Flash, this like room full of people. And I was like, okay, I can do this. So I was so pumped, ready to go. I was hyped, man. I was like, let's do this, you know? And I get in there and there's nobody there. The room is empty. Nobody there. And I am like, what is happening? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And on the wall, there's a line. It's like Flash line, and it has issue numbers and then the characters. And it basically was my pitch, but like kind of broken down of like, here are the characters, blah, blah. I had something in my outline. There's way more to this story about this whole process, but I'm going to keep it shorter to get to the more emotional stuff of it all. But so then, Jeff walks into the room, and I actually hadn't spoken to Jeff. Like, I've known Jeff for a long time, but I actually hadn't spoken to Jeff over 5 years. So not even in the 3 years being gone, but for a long time, I hadn't spoken to him.
Yeah.
Like, I think the last time him and I saw each other, I outside of a like, hi, you know what I mean? But I hadn't seen him in easily 5 years. And he walks in, and I shake his hand. I say, hi, how are you? And then the editor is there, and he's like, oh, you guys know each other? And I'm like, yeah, I've known Jeff for a long time, but I'm like, I haven't seen him. We haven't spoken to each other in 5 years. And Jeff was like, 5 years, isn't that right? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, dude. But also in my head, I was like, at least 3, because I know I haven't spoken to a single person at DC in at least 3 years.
Yeah.
But I said to the editor and to Jeff, I was like, I actually met Jeff right when he got the job on. Like, he had just started writing it. And then Jeff was like, yeah, and now you're writing Flash. And that was the first time somebody said those words.
Right.
And we got to work. We started talking. I didn't pitch to anybody. We sat down. We started talking about the story. I started telling Jeff stuff I was thinking. He was going over my outline. We were talking about it. Dan walked in at one point. How's everything going? I'm like, I'm good. Jeff's like, it's going great. Dan gave me a hug, walked out. That was it.
Nice.
I was like, oh man, they know something I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, they figured it out. But there was something I always get on my skin when somebody would say like, oh, they thought I got the job on the Flash because I knew Jeff. And I'm like, dude, that's not what happened. What happened was 5
years. Exactly.
What happened was, it all comes down to this. That sounds silly. It all comes down to, well, it was the pitch, because I pitched a story.
Yeah.
I didn't pitch, and this, I know it's a lot of characters. I didn't pitch me on Flash. I pitched a story for Flash.
Yes.
And, but what got me that job and got me that meeting was the sales on my trade.
Birthright.
Or in my image trade for Birthright. Yeah, that is what got me that job.
That's what kicked the door in, but what kept you in the
Yeah.
building was the story.
Was a story. I think there's a lot with creators where they're like, well, the pitch is me doing it. It's like, no. What is the story you're telling? And that was a lesson I learned. Every once in a while you stumble with that. It's like you could have other goals, but really my goal was to tell this story.
Yeah.
And I had something to say about Barry Allen.
Right.
And so I was like, here's what I want to say about Barry Allen. Here's what I want to say about this universe, this mythology. Here's what I want to do, pitch to them. And then it was off to the races after that, and I got the job doing Justice League vs. Suicide Squad. Before Flash #1 even came out, I got offered the exclusive, and I was like, I can do it as long as I can keep doing Birthright and Nailbiter. That was the thing, And they were like, yes, that was we were.
Like, that's why you're here, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, so that makes sense. It's kind of similar to what happened when Jason Aaron got the exclusive at Marvel. There was a clause he keeps doing scalped because it was like everyone loved it. Why would we stop this?
And Marvel's like, that's not gonna hurt us. It's fine. Like,
no, it's no good. I mean, I feel like that's good business, and it shows good relationships with the creators.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
But it's part of why I have become so appreciative of what I do at DC Comics. Like the fact that I get to tell these stories, I get to be with these characters, and I get to, it's why I'm so appreciative of like especially fans and readers, really, like the readership at conventions and at signings. And but at the end of the day, I take value of what I'm doing, and I recognize how lucky I am to do what I'm doing. It's really a big part of why I'm so. Yeah, I feel like I come to work every day.
Right.
And I hope that like the fans see that. I hope that the people who love, when I say fans, I'm talking about DC fans, not fans of me. I'm talking about like DC fans.
Yeah.
I hope they can tell that I don't take it for granted.
Right.
I really value those characters, and I value this universe, and it's like it is why I make sure I show up to work every day. Like when people ask me like, how do I write so many books? I'm like, dude, I know what it's like to have all this gone.
Yes.
And if I have these opportunities, I'm going to take them. It's
right.
like I think I told you last time. It's like I tried to read Green Arrow forever, and it never worked out. And then the day it works out, it's like, do I have room for this? Probably not.
Yeah. but I'm not going to say no, because this might be the last.
No. And don't get me wrong,
they ask you. It's like,
don't get me wrong. I've said no to stuff. Like I've said no to projects and books. Either because I didn't think I was the right person for a book. That's happened a few times where I'm like, no, I'm not the guy for that.
Well, you just didn't have the story, right? It's just like, if you don't have a story in your heart for that character or for that idea, it's like, it's not worth it.
Yeah. But it's like, I learned a lot about myself in that time. I learned about myself as a creator. And it was like, having that up and down. And then again, like just having like, my heart kind of broken in a way, and then being able to come back around to it. It's why I appreciate it so much. It's why I can be very positive and appreciative of the company, but also, again, like when I go to conventions, I prefer that kind of interaction, where I can actually talk to a person, opposed to, it's part of why I don't really talk to people on Twitter as much, because I feel like it is so much of it's not true to me, for me, at least. Like I respect people who are that is their place to have their voice. They're just better at it than I am. For me, it's like, no, I don't think that's the true me. Mm-hmm. I'd rather have this, like talk to you or do this podcast, but really talk to people in person, like
on the floor.
On the floor. And I have a lot of value for what I do, and I'm very thankful for the stuff I've been able to tell. It's like I've been able to do the Flash and do like I did a Crisis event. I got to write Batman. I've gotten to write Robin, who's a character also I really love. I love Damian.
Yeah.
And then now I get to do Superman, which is like, to me, Superman is like the DC character. I mean, there's Batman. Batman is his own beast, but it's like, dude, Superman is a whole other ball game.
It is.
It's like, and so it's really, again, like all those experiences of thinking like, oh man, I'm done at DC, and going through this sort of like weird breakup in a way. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing I do want to stress is like, I don't actually fault anyone at DC in that time period. And I don't fault anybody that was going on, because it's like, at the end of the day, it was my responsibility and I didn't show up. And like you said, they were trying. Yeah. And I, I'm sure I look back, there's other moments I messed up, but it's like, I wasn't doing anything. And it's a lesson I learned, I think, from, and I would impart this to other people who are trying to break into comics. Like, it is about, you can't say yes to everything. You gotta find yourself in that. And I remember talking about this with, and it's something I still struggle with at times, trying to make sure there's me in the story. Where Superman, I think Superman has a lot of that. Like, I remember talking about this with Grant once, Grant Morrison, and Grant. I'm gonna name drop here for a moment.
Oh, Grant. Oh, yes, of course.
Creators of all time. Talking to Grant, and Grant was like, you need to find yourself. Like, that was it. Like, it's always flattering to know that I know the history of these books and these characters.
Yes.
But trying to find myself in it was the key. And I think a lot of ways with Robin and with Superman, you can see that. That's me doing that. But it is that thing of, like, I still feel like I'm learning in the field. Like, I feel like I'm still figuring stuff out. To bring it back to the apple thing, it's like I'm still trying to find my way to draw that apple.
That's right.
It's like I'm still trying to piece together. But again, it's why I become so, I really do appreciate what I get to do every day, and how I get to do the stuff at DC Comics and have these conversations with editorial and creators and trying to guide these characters. It's why, again, I value those characters so much, and I value this experience so much, because I've seen, I wouldn't do that, like the downfall of it, I guess, on my end. Like, I saw, the out, and it's also why I try to be really good about talking to other creators too, like newer creators. I try. I'm not always best at it, mostly because it can be overwhelming in terms of the amount of emails you get asking for help. But it is why I try to be very honest with people when they ask you for help. Yes. Working in comics, I try to be like, okay, here's what you gotta do. I know it's hard to explain. Like, remember to breathe, and then try to find your way. But yeah, so that's the story. That was 2012. Story, that was the thing. But it's why I really appreciate the fact that I get to do what I do now, and I get to do these big books for DC because of that, like that process, I guess.
You can see the
two.
Go ahead. You can see the two roads diverge. Where, like, in one, you're where you are now. You've done these things. You're in a place that's healthy and happy, and you're telling your stories. You're being you. You're being your authentic self, and you're writing. And then there's the other one where, because like, if you had just listened to your dream, it's like, my dream was to work for DC. Yeah. You could have very easily told yourself, I did it. I have these books that I wrote for DC.
Oh, dude, I heard that. And that one thing, and then they go, I'm out.
And just go, like,
a land of bitterness,
right?
And they get frozen.
Absolutely.
And they don't do anything else.
Well, like that moment, you remember that moment in Glengarry Glen Ross where Alec Baldwin is making fun of everybody in the room, and he just goes, "Yeah, I was a salesman. It's a tough racket." It's like that could have been, it's like,
I think about that all the time. Listen, I quote that scene probably way too much. But dude, it's definitely. Again, that's part of why I just appreciate all this stuff, and I see it, and I'm just thankful for it. I've seen how I can kind of, and again, it was my fault. Like, I was the one that did, like, blew the meeting. I was the one that didn't, wasn't being myself. Wasn't.
They were waiting for you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I don't know if I put it that way.
Well, no, because what's funny? I've been in a room that I'm not welcome in. Like, I've been in a room where, like, thanks to somebody else, I'm in that room, and you try to, like, strike it out for yourself in that room, and you're just met with brick walls, because they're like, who the hell are you, and what are you doing here? And it's like, you want to get out of that room as soon as humanly possible. But, like, dude, if they don't want you in that room, they will find a way for you to find the door. And in this case, like, in that case, it seemed like they were looking for they were like, can we keep this dude in this room? Like, all he has to do is say the right thing and do the right, like, just be himself. And it's just like, you were telling the wrong, you're telling the wrong jokes, telling the wrong story. It's like, just being.
Well, I didn't.
You weren't being yourself.
Yeah, I wasn't being myself. I wasn't bringing anything to the table. Like, I was just. And
that too. You weren't showing your value.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's funny you brought the room thing up. There was a time where there was like I had heard this. So 2013 New York Comic Con. So a year after all this was going on, I was definitely feeling like I was still very much feeling very out of DC. Like, I was definitely doing. So 2013, like, Ghosted had come out, got to midnight, but like Nailbiter and Birthright were a whole other thing, right?
Yeah.
So 2013 New York Comic Con was still a little like iffy for me, and still feeling isolated from. I felt very isolated from comics still.
Yeah.
And I went to New York Comic Con, and I was hanging out with a couple of creators, and they were like, "Oh, there's a karaoke thing going on." I'm not a karaoke person.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of friends who absolutely love and kill at karaoke. I am just not it. Yep. But they were like, "We're going to this karaoke thing. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Well, hang out with you guys, sure, why not?"
Yeah.
And we're walking, and as we were walking, another character walked by, and they were like, "Do not go in that room." And they kept walking past like a ghost. They literally like a ghostly warning: "Do not go in that room." It was a private karaoke thing.
Yeah.
With another thing, if you're going to someone's private karaoke party, you better be invited.
Exactly.
We were not invited. And we walk in, and guess what? It is a DC karaoke party.
Mm-hmm.
I walked in and was like, oh my God. And I saw one person I knew. I walked up and said, "Hey, good to see you. Okay, bye." And I walked out of that room faster than I had ever walked out of a room before in my life. I was like a cartoon character. There was a Josh-shaped like hole in the wall of me getting out of that room. Because I definitely was like, and it was weird because I don't think there was any hostility. There's no hostility there. It was just I was so uncomfortable because also I had felt rejected. So it was like I'm already being super awkward about this. Probably. Yeah. I was like, I gotta get out of here. But and it's good. Like I definitely have like a lot of good relationships with DC and a lot of creators that I'm close with. I met later. It's like James and I. James and I like knew each other, but we didn't start talking until Rebirth. And that's a person I've talked to. Like he's one of my closest friends. I talk to every day. Same with Tom King. Tom King is somebody I didn't meet until Rebirth, and him and I went on a signing together to. We went on a signing in Atlanta together and just like bonded, and just talked a lot about stuff. We talked a lot about 5-Year Legion. And Keith Giffen, how Keith Giffen is a genius. And like my relationship with Scott and people that I met after really started talking. I knew Scott before, but we didn't really start talking until around it. But it's like, we really, it was a very different experience post that,
Sure.
Like, but again, that's why I try to be I'm a little more aware of the people when they're trying to have really a lot of empathy for creators that are coming up. I try.
Sure.
And I recognize sounds like. Anyway, so that's my sad story.
There you go.
We got to end on a palate cleanser. We should talk about something fun before we close out, so we're not talking about sad things.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this just as a quick palate cleanser. We've talked about like collectibles and stuff that we enjoy. Do you have what's your trophy? What's your like? I got this. And it's, it could be a signature, it could be a statue or a prop. But do you have like a thing where you're like, oh, don't move that. Like, I'll move that.
Don't move that.
I'll touch that.
I don't know. I mean, I had to think about that. I mean, I have some comics and things like that. I feel like there's some art stuff, like original art pieces that I'm like, that's something special to me. And, but you're talking about like the Holy Grail kind of thing, but not like
as a collector, as a comic book geek, like you're just like, I got this thing and I got it and it's mine and and no one else touched it.
I have to think. I know one thing. That's really personal. I have to think about that because I have a couple little things that are definitely like, oh, I have this and it's mine. So special about like I've like mostly art stuff, but one of the things I have here in my office, I don't think you can see it here. It's right there. So Birthright, I think we were like a year into Birthright, maybe 2 years into Birthright. You can't see it. I'm not going to touch it.
Okay. No.
But I have this thing up here. Andre, who's also like a good friend. He's an artist on Birthright. He's also an artist on Dark Ride. Great guy.
Yeah.
He had a friend who was a sculptor. And he made an actual bust of Mikey from Birthright, the main character of Birthright. He made a bust like with arms and it has a mace and an axe. Like it just looks really cool.
That's awesome.
It's made of bronze.
Oh.
And there are only 8 in the world.
That's awesome.
And I got it near a Comic Con, and I remember being like, "How am I getting this
home? Like, how are you going to get that? Yeah, how do you? I guess ship it.
How am I getting this home?" And I remember being so nervous it would break. I mean, it's bronze, so but don't get me wrong. I'm still nervous about it breaking.
Totally.
It's one of those things that when I move offices or I move it, I am more afraid and careful with anything else because irreplaceable. I have one. Andre has one. Mackwitz has one. Robert Kirkman has one. One of the editors, she has one. One of the original editors, she has one. The sculptor has one. Sean Kirkham, who used to work at Scum, has one, and I think that's it. I feel like I can't remember who has the eighth one. I had to think about it. Oh, Adriano.
Oh,
I think Adriano and Pat. So basically, the creative team has one, and there's 4 others. I'm trying to remember the whole thing. There's 8. I think that's the math of it. But yeah, there's 8 of them. I can't remember if Pat got one. I feel bad if Pat didn't. I'll have to ask him. But Adriano, the colorist, has the 8th one, I think.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
I think that's the actual number of who has them, but then that's it. And so that's the thing I'm always like, I can never replace it. Because I could break something. Like I had a Superman bust that broke, and now I have to replace it. It broke a couple years ago, though. And so
was that the one that was at your was that your brother's place or something like that? Where you...
No, that's that Batman thing that's over there.
Okay.
I moved that. Because it was too big back here. I moved.
No, there was a Superman bust or something like that was like it went missing, and you were like, "Why do you have that?"
No, that was Batman.
Oh, it was Batman. Okay,
that was the Batman one. Yeah, it was giant from the Warner Brothers store. I moved that. No, it was a small Superman bust, and it broke, and so I actually I know a store that has it. I might actually pick it up today. So that broke a while ago, though, and so
sure.
That,
but
again, like I can
you
replace
could get
that.
It. Yeah,
yeah. It's like $50. Sure, let's do it. That would be impossible to replace. And so there's things like that. I have some comics and like that, but that's one that I'm like, this is this, and it is irreplaceable. I have other little things. Like there's something over here I have where it was like one year The Walking Dead did this promotional thing where they sent people this package that looked like it was a serial killer package. It was so creepy. And it was a promotional thing. They sent out like 10 of them. And you were supposed to post it online, and I was the worst person to send it to, as you know, because I don't do anything online.
Yeah.
And I remember getting these messages of people being like, "You have to post it. You have to post it." And I was like, "I have to do what now? Like, what's going on?"
What?
Because it had like part of it had a puzzle, and then people online were put it together. And I was
my
like,
god,
I was the worst person to send it to because I'm like, it was supposed to be like a viral thing, and I'm like, "Why'd you send me this? What's happening?"
Yeah.
They're like, "Promote it online," and I was like, "What's going on?"
I don't really do
that. I will end on this. I have this dope Green Arrow #2 that comes out. There's actually a joke in here where somebody calls him Green Lantern, but and he's like, "No, it's Green Arrow." But yeah, this comes out soon. This might actually come out when you're posting this. So
nice.
Pick this up. Yeah. But we should end there, so it's end on a high note and not sad stuff.
Right? No. I think it's an inspirational story. I think it's a triumphant tale, but it's like but
I hope so. I mean, it's not over yet.
Well, that's true. Well, that's like the life story.
Yeah. Like that's a real life doesn't have 3 acts. Is the
exactly?
So
no, we talked about that.
Yeah. But, so we'll see.
Yeah, but listen, Superman Annual's coming out. You got to pick that up, folks. Green Arrow #2.
Superman Annual in August.
Yeah, comics, man. Comic books. Check them out.
Yeah, comics.
Thank you, Josh, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you guys next time here at ComicPop Returns. So long, everybody.